If you guys have any questions or anything the floor is open. So now this is the time to start talking about the game and the videos and the topics. The initial video, I hope you guys enjoy. It was pure satire. I just wanted to make people laugh, because like I enjoyed the guild versus guild content in this game. I wish there was a little bit more. I also wish that they didn't restrict the servers where only guilds have within the reach of like 25 servers. I feel like that is a dangerous mistake to make in a game like this, especially if you're trying to implement guild versus guild stuff, because a lot of guilds, especially as players quit, for events or reasons and stuff like that, it's hard to refill the guild slots. Like right now, my guild is we're level 6, and max players is 55 members, but right now, realistically, we have, I believe, 46. And like trying to refill those ranks is almost impossible if I can't reach the massive player base that we have. Because from my understanding, a lot of people re-roll. They leave their old servers. A lot of old, the first servers that launched, though, they're already set up and situated, so people are not joining those. So, to restrict the guild to only 25 guild servers, you're realistically like preventing them from being able to push forward in terms of the guild events. Uh, I know some guilds who they're like, oh, I barely have 5 members, I barely have 10 members. So if you're trying to compete against guilds like the Baldies and Jury Duties and stuff like that, you're just not gonna get far. You're gonna get decimated by one of their players. A whale will just laugh at these small guilds just by themselves. So it's something that I hope they alleviate or fix or whatever. They should have just never did whatever they did to the servers. And so that was the thing that I have with the guilds, and I just wanted to do something fun. In terms of the assists, like I said in the video, a lot of people they're focused on the level 10s, level 20, level 30s of the assist, of the fighting spirit, which obviously makes sense. I myself, on fighting spirit 29 on Dalsum, I need that one more so I could get the beauty burn, and the stack burns. Like, I'm so close to it. So like, you know, I wanted people to broaden their horizon in terms of in all aspects of team building. Like, if you go into the leaderboards, all you see is Bison, Beast Zangief, X, and that's gonna be either Guile, Viper. I rarely actually see Dawson, which is a shame on everybody. And that's about it. Like you even don't see teams like Cammy and oh, the Cappy. I know everyone calls her like trash, but like with the design of how Bison is, he realistically prevents a lot of team concepts, which kind of sucks. So I hope we get more counters to him. But what do you guys think in terms of like fighting spirits, on what you guys enjoy? If you guys tested anything?
Well, let me jump in for
Yeah,
the
what's
guild
up?
observation. So like if you can open up the guild to all servers, but when it comes to creating ecosystems of player versus player content, you gotta separate them into groups. I feel so. I think uh Super Showdown does it the best. I think the different you have a champion of a group, and then those champions will meet up in a grand final situation. But the guilds not being accessible limits the players from experiencing that type of content in general. So merging the servers, that's probably not the correct term, but the idea that I or the observation I'm trying to make is get all of the users to be able to search for guilds, but when it comes time to compete at the guild level, it should be separated into groups to allow uh, for equal level play.
No, yeah, I definitely agree because how if for example if you had like a server one like server 1 guild versus a server 300 guild, server 300 is most likely going to get dumpstered because of how built up the older servers are with the, launch players and stuff like that. But I definitely agree on that the whole search part. I don't understand. I wish, obviously, communications issue, blah blah blah. I just wish, like, I don't understand why. What was it that caused them to turn off whatever they turned off in the server thing? Because initially everyone's able to search no matter what. Like, I got people from server 50 to server 100 before they turned off the server searches and stuff like that. It, it's it's it hinders the growth in the game overall. Another thing that I maybe someone else could speak on this because I'm not very experienced on this, but the frequency of the servers being created, it's a lot. Like, we have a lot of servers, and it constantly, I think every week or every 2 weeks, more servers are coming out. And like, I understand, more players are coming in and stuff like that, but like, I feel like we're like most other games, they get to a point where they're like, all right, we got 500 servers, we got to combine them together and merge servers to make it 250 or whatever the case may be. Like, I guess I don't understand the business aspect of like why making so many servers if there's ones that are existing. But I guess I have to think of it in the terms of a player who surprisingly, a lot of amount of players like to re-roll and want to get the best unit that is on the top of the tier list. And I feel like, me personally, I don't. That's a lot of time investing in doing something like that. But I also like the challenge of like, all right, I got these units. I'm gonna make it work. See what happens. Yeah, free to play character says we have 1,500 servers across NA, EU, Crunchyroll, and then there's A plus. Yeah, what the issue also with that is that I I I understand this is most likely like a financial aspects of like connecting NA plus EU, because that, I'm assuming, takes a lot of manpower and computing power and money and stuff like that. But that was also a big hit to the game, in my personal opinion, because I lost out on half of my friends that was ready, like, hyped to play Street Fighter duels, and we were hyped to work together in the guild and stuff like that. But and the moment the game launched, we tried to find them and they were nowhere to be seen. And that's when everyone's heart was broken and found out that if you're in EU, you're only playing with EU, and if you're in NA, you're only playing in NA. And it sucks. It sucks a lot. Um, but yeah, moving on past that, unless anyone has other things to bring up on the guild, we could talk about. I did have few topics that I did want to talk about. Is the fighting assist topic, the new collabs of Dante, and possible future collabs as to what we hope to see. And because a lot of people were complaining that in other regions, Dante is the second collab and the final collab. They don't have other collabs, so they felt uh they were like, "Hey, are we gonna get more collabs? Because if Dante is the last one, that means the game's gonna die in a year because they're trying to push out all this content." And like, one thing I'm gonna say is, like, for folks who are just like, game dead or game's gonna die, like, it's realistically, it's Street Fighter. Just that alone is gonna make it last a good amount of time. But the game itself, like, if you just took the game without the jaded glasses, the gameplay and the concept of the game itself is really fun. I can hop on the voice after your teacher. Oh yeah, awesome. That would be awesome. The concept of the game is, in itself, like, I've always see people in the Discord, they're like saying, I stay for two reasons. The game is fun to play, and I like the community. Obviously there's a lot of other caveats and issues, like, monetaries and contents and stuff like that. But like, again, this is only what, second, we're now reaching the third month of life, and within these few months they have made some quality of life adjustments and changes and stuff like that. So we are seeing a growth from the teams themselves on how they're handling things. Like just now, we could take into the example Dante collaboration. Obviously, we don't know the full event system, but the tickets, it's not Monster Hunter Tears. They didn't name it Devil May Cry Tears. They I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but like so far it's showing that it's going to be in that special event like banner like Akuma. So there's hope for everyone. If you saved your tickets, awesome. You're gonna have a dope chance at Dante. So I think that alone is a massive step. I legitimately think that that alone is a massive step to show the player base like, hey, we're listening and we're willing to work on things. Topic says, to be fair, Kuma Banner is way worse than Monster Hunter Ken. I would like for you to elaborate if you possibly could, but I'm gonna give the floor to Dino because he wants to clarify something. If
Yeah, obvious. Yeah, again, thank you so much. Um, so one thing I wanted to pretty much address was, how people are talking about the Dante collaboration and they're mentioning how it's super early, etc. So I want to, shed some light on that. Firstly, as we mentioned time and time again, I think we even mentioned this like before the game launched, actually. There would be exclusive units. And I don't know if people understand what I meant by that. So I'm going to just elaborate what I mean. So if you guys know on the CN version, there is Chinese, I would say, what is it, gods or something? I'm pretty sure, or things like that. From what I've been looking into, they have some exclusive units of their own that obviously won't be coming to global. I'd be very shocked if it did. So I'm not 100% sure if that will ever be a plan. But with that, we are having our own exclusive units, right? So obviously, I can't really hint like what's being talked about, but there is some good information that will be coming out very soon to you guys, and it's going to be a survey. This survey, it's going to kind of see you guys as players. It's going to really understand the player base as a whole. Since social media is the minority of the players, we do have somebody within our games team that works on the in-game related stuff when it comes to getting input from players. So this survey, once it hits in-game, I'm not sure exactly if it's going to be this month or next month, but the survey should be very soon. With when you guys complete the survey, you will be getting obviously some rewards for completing the survey. But the survey asks some pretty high detailed questions. It asks about anime. It asks about TV shows. It asks about, oh man, a lot of different stuff, movies. It asks kind of like your spending in the game. It's a really detailed survey that kind of like understands you as a player. And we will get all of that information from the players and kind of understand exactly what type of collaboration you guys would want to see in the near future. There's a big list of possibilities that we're looking into, which is really fun. Like it's some exciting stuff. It's super early to really talk about it, but that is why you guys are seeing, Monster Hunter Ken being the first one, Dante being the second one, etc. There is a lot of events coming down the pipeline, a lot of characters coming down the pipeline that is exclusive to Crunchyroll games and A plus, and it's not going to be on the Chinese version, right? So I think that is where a lot of players at the end of the day are kind of worried because they were like, what we're just doing is taking from one version of the game and pretty much pasting it to Crunchyroll games and A plus, which is not true, right? So the developers we work with, and that's another misconception I'm going to squash here. Crunchyroll games A plus are not the devs. Period. We don't touch the game in that way. We have a completely different development team. It's actually the development team that you guys wish you had that version of the game. It's the same team. So that's information for you guys, right? It's the same team. Anyway, they're kind of, making the experience different for our versions because every single one of the games they worked on is a different experience for all versions. So you have the Chinese version that's completely different. The Taiwanese version is also different. Those two versions are going to be completely different from what we're offering. So understanding that aspect, what we're going to bring, and then also, again, the survey that's going to come out that's really going to emphasize what the majority of the player base really likes or really wants. It's going to be super crucial for us to understand that so we can see what kind of collaborations you guys would like. The list is really cool. It's not something, it's more like to understand what you guys like as fans outside of the Street Fighter IP. So there might be some questions around existing Capcom IP, something that isn't a part of Capcom at all, more on the anime side, movies, TV series, celebrities. Celebrities will also be something that will be discussed in the survey, so you guys can, list off some celebrities that you really like, or if there's any option to pick any. I've seen the survey, and it's going to be kind of like edited a little bit. I don't think it's going to be the full final version, but that survey will be really detailed. And again, for those that, I mean, it's going to be available for all players, but those that complete the survey, you will get something in return for that. But it's really to allow us to understand what you guys want as players and what types of collaborations we'll bring in the future. So hopefully that answers a lot of the questions.
So possible Canadian rap star Drake joining the game, or the Shaolin monks of Wu Tang Clan. I would go homeless for Wu Tang. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, what's really cool with the survey is I actually think it asks what celebrities you like. So if you want to name those, I think it should be an option unless they change it. It should be an option where you can put, what you recommend, and that could be something that we could explore. But yeah, there is going to be exclusive units. And I also wanted to cover one thing that I think it's good to know for the games industry. Like, I don't expect players to know this, but it's super good as players to know this information. Is that how people are reporting the money that this game is making, right? They're reporting it as like it's making less, but how the games industry looks at that, and this is just completely 100% transparent. How the game industry looks at that is the first month is always going to do great for no matter what game it is. Like, understand that point, right? Any game that launches, their first month is always going to be their strongest month. After the fact, it's going to decrease. It's totally normal. If anything, this amount that the Akuma event made and how the game was doing actually exceeded expectations again. So not only did we exceed expectations 10 times more than what our goal was in the first month, it exceeded 10 times more on the second month. So the game is doing well. That's what I was trying to tell people. Like, the game is absolutely doing well. There is literally over 100,000 players consistently playing the game. And that has not dipped. That has actually stayed consistent every day. So to understand that part is super important. The game is doing fairly well. How it is being perceived online is a different story. Because again, it's a vocal minority, but also if you guys have not seen like the Devil May Cry press, all that stuff, combine all of that, and you guys will kind of see how the people who are not in these communities view the game. Which for most of them, they're like, oh, this game looks great. Oh, this game looks really fun. That's most of the crowds that will be joining for the Devil May Cry collaboration. And that's how like new players come in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that makes sense too, because I don't think people understand that value. Like, the game is doing well, and it's actually super common for a game to drop after its release. That's actually normal in the industry. That's normal everywhere. Like, anybody who's launched a game, I've launched a few games. I've been a part of game launches. The first month always does well. And then the second or the third month, it trickles down, which is normal. They all see that as normal, and that's just how it is. People are more into it because it's really popular. People are talking about it right now. And then obviously, as time goes on, some people who love the it's new right now will start to drift away. And then those that actually want to stay for the game long haul will be here for the long haul. So
Cool. Would you be able to speak on what free to play casual mentions with collabs and how they uh feel catered to whales? But I, I know we're already kind of seeing changes away from that. Could you like maybe verify that those changes are right in terms of like what we're seeing, that it's more friendlier now against like Monster Hunter Ken event?
if we look at it in the overall, it's an interesting one because what players are saying from the Monster Hunter Ken event versus what was going on with Akuma, the perceptions are different. But if you're looking for me as a player who's also free to play, so I have a free to play account myself. I don't spend a penny. Actually, we have a coworker that I work with who's actually a whale himself. He's actually spent like 4 digits. I spent no money. But I also have access to like the test server and stuff, so I could get those units. But just to be 100%, um, I was able to get Akuma to S rank, and for Monster Hunter Ken, I was not even close, right? So if we look at it in that aspect, I mean, was it more free to play friendly? If you got lucky, absolutely, right? But that's a lot. But is it more free to play friendly? If we think of it like that, absolutely, because there has been free to play players that did better than some who paid. So how can that not be free to play friendly if it opens the door for more people to get the character and to rank them up too? I mean, bad luck is bad luck, right? Which is unfortunate. That's why it's a good question, a weird one, because the bad part is somebody who spent didn't get to the level that they did with Monster Hunter 10. So it's like how you view that, it's up to the person. But I will tell you that obviously I got more copies of Akuma than Monster Hunter can.
Yeah, that. I mean, I think almost everyone got more copies of Kuma than Monster. Well, I can't say that because I know some people who spent like 150 tickets and didn't even get one Akuma. But again, that's the RNG of the game. In connection to like the RNGs and stuff like that, are you able to talk on the pity and stuff like that? Is that something that you're a topic you're able to like communicate on? Because
No,
that's
I personally don't know anything about that.
okay. That's
Yeah, it's not something that I can comment on.
understand. Yeah, that's definitely just in general for people that are not aware. There is I don't know if it's a misconception, but there's a belief that previously the game had a form of pity where if you pulled 10, 13, 15 times, you would be guaranteed the unit that you're seeking. And now people are believing that what was once there is no longer there. My personal opinion is that there's never been a confirmation on pity, and two, that's that is the basis of a gotcha game. Is the RNG. It that's the way the cookie crumbles. One day you'll pull a one pull, and then somehow people are getting three Akumas in a 10 pull. Versus some people, like I said previously, did like 100 pulls and didn't get a single Akuma. That's just RNG, and a lot of people are not liking it. But throwing out the words rigged and pity is, I don't know. I feel like it's razor's edge type of topic because there's like in one instance, let's say there was pity, and if I'm thinking in the aspects of I'm a dev, and I'm doing this in the aspects of business and trying to make money and stuff like that, and I get a report where people are saying stuff about pity, saying that it's rigged, and no, from what I'm understanding, some people are like saying, "Oh, we never said pity is bad. We never said rigged is bad. We just want it to be seen." to that, my thing would be is be careful what you ask for because the response may not be exactly what you think. If there was pity, and if I'm a dev and there's complaints and they're like show this or do this, and let's say I have a list of things that I'm already working on in the game, and you want to add more onto that list with complaints, I'll just delete the pity, save myself the work. Now y'all can't complain about me not showing pity because it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that's the best ideology. I'm not saying that that's how the devs think. I'm just saying that if I was a dev, I'd probably be fired because of that mentality. But that's how I think about it. Like, why am I gonna cause more work for myself and my team as a developer when I could, if that's really there, I'm just gonna like nuke it and then okay, now it's full RNG. Is that the best way to go about it? No, you could probably made an asset on it and just put it out in like 5 minutes and put it in and say, hey, look, this is the pity thing. But everyone's mentality is different. I remember the conversation previously in other calls. I guess maybe Dino can reaffirm this is that the way every developer and publisher, they all work differently. You know, Sega works different than Crunchyroll. Crunchyroll works different than Topjoy. Topjoy works different than Tencent. So you have to take into consideration like where the developer is located also has a huge impact on their decisions because you know um in terms of how quote unquote Americans think, supposedly um uh compared to other regions, Americans spend more on like product in terms of like how much they spend in a overall group versus another region where their player base will spend less but still spend a good amount. So I don't know if that's something you could talk about on like how teams are different and how not every developer works the same.
Let me see. Let me answer top eight's question because it might actually correlate with what you just asked.
Yeah.
So top eight. This is. I'm glad that you mentioned that because the perception between publisher and developer. I think so many people get confused by this because of all the games that exist in the world, right? So, for example, if we take something like AFK Arena, I'm going to pick on AFK Arena because they're the perfect example for this. It's a similar type of game, et cetera, et cetera. Why is Street Fighter Duel not operating the same way? The reason why is because AFK Arena is owned by the publisher. They are the same developers, and they also own the IP. They do all three. That's all. They're in control of all that. The difference between Street Fighter Duel is you have a lot of teams involved. So Crunchyroll Games is the sub-license to A+. So A+ is their own publisher. If anything, A+ is the main publisher for their version, kind of our version because we got the license from them. Okay, so that's one aspect. So we are publishing on our regions, and A+ is publishing on their regions. After that, the development teams are all of the developers, as I mentioned before, that you guys are really big fans of for the Chinese version, yada yada. It's the same devs. So those are the exact same developers you guys are seeing that are working on those versions. They're working on this one too. As for how things are priced, this is going to go back to what Top 8 said. How things are priced is an interesting one. It's a mix between the publisher and the developer. So if you understand the relationship with what this game is going through, as a publisher, the biggest thing the publisher wants to do is make profit, right? That's the get go to the point. The developer in this case knows and understands their own product. So, for example, if we're pricing something at $100, the developer will be like, okay, this is the items and what we feel matches with what your goal is for $100 for a player to spend. If we're going off of the developer's word, we will, because the developers are the product experts of their own product. We are not. As publishers, we do not own, well, we now own the license to that, but we don't develop the game. So they're the ones that understand their product more than we understand the product. So obviously, with a mix of all that, there might be prices that we're putting into that, but how the items are accumulated and what's being worth those specific things, that's coming from the devs. Like that's the development teams, because the development teams understand what is good for their game and what is not good for the game. Or that's what, as a partnership, that's what we understand. That's what we value. And we're not going to go off of against our partners. That's the other thing. A lot of people think that the publisher in this case, like Crunchyroll Games, but it's also A plus two, is telling the developers, okay, you need to do this in game, you need to do that. That's actually not true. The developers, being the product experts of their own thing, they're the ones that's developing the game. They're the ones that's making the events. They're the ones that is doing all that stuff that you guys are mentioning. But we're as publishers doing the marketing. We're doing the ads, we're working with the influencers, et cetera, et cetera. So as a publisher, we're doing something completely different. We're doing kind of like more of the external stuff. And then we do have producers on our team, but the producers, they help with some of the translation here and there. That's still in partnership with the devs. So the devs also help with that. Our team is pretty small in that regard. And then also obviously A plus is joined with that. So A plus has their own teams to pitch into. But as developers, that's a completely different avenue. So if we're looking at like Western companies, for example, and the IP that they work with, that dynamic is different because the publisher actually has more say than the developers. That's the way that Westernized IP usually is. When it comes to Eastern IP, Asian IP, Japanese IP, I've worked in Japanese related IP for years, and they all work the same way. They all do it the same way. So when I was at Sega, for example, I worked for Sega of America, but in reality, I was working for Japan. And we did have global titles, right? We brought global titles, but the thing is, nobody knows who exactly brought those titles to global. It wasn't Sega of America, it was Sega of Japan. So Sega of America was kind of seen as like the marketing, consulting, this and that of what we should do on social media, what we should do on marketing. But that doesn't mean the developers or those that's bringing those titles or helping bring those titles and knows their game more than we do. That doesn't mean they're going to follow through with what we say. That's just not, that doesn't work like that. It's a completely different dynamic. And that's just the relationship with Japanese IP. So understanding that is super important, especially if you guys want to play licensed games, play games that might have that does involve multiple teams. Is something to keep in mind because at the end of the day, all the companies that are part of that venture, they obviously want to make profit. But I think the ultimate thing that most people don't get is that these companies that people are mainly like targeting against, they're also the ones that want to bring these titles to the global market. A lot of people think that Japan wants to do it. In reality, guys, they don't. They just want to focus on their area and their region. Anyone global that takes it, that's why it's other companies trying to add to that so there's more accessibility to other players. It's because that's the goals of like Crunchyroll, that's the goals of like Bandai Namco, that's the goals of Sega, that's the goals of all these teams. Like they want to bring these titles globally so you guys can have a taste of what other people are getting from Japan or anywhere in Asia, etc., anywhere in the eastern side. And they want you guys to experience that globally. But most of the Japanese companies will not bring it globally because that's not what they want to do because they've noticed time and time again that globally it's hard to make money from what they've seen. And when they see a lot of titles not being supported, it pushes them back from wanting to do anything with that. So that's why they themselves never bring the title. So hopefully
The
that.
cultures are different. The cultures between a Japanese player and a global player is different. Like everybody, even in parts of America, South America, different regions, like their habits are different. So that might supplement what you're trying to say. But I I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention some of the concerns that I have as personally, and the stuff that I hear from people in my friends group that I know personally. It's just it's a tough. It is a little tough on us right now on the way that the monetization is, but when we look at the Dante and stuff, and hopefully with this survey, it'll shed some light onto what players are wanting as far as the future of the game. But I have been listening and working at the same time, so I'm sorry if I missed some of the details.
Yes, okay.
But the point I wanted to make with the characters and the spending is it's a little taxing to look at it through the bigger picture and the smaller picture. It's like with Akuma and the pity system, them having to make money and be a successful and long standing game. It the push in the very beginning was it was a really hard push, and then we got Monster Hunter Ken, and then that changed, and then Akuma was certainly eye opening with the removal of the pity system. It would just would have almost been better to spend a certain amount of tickets to get to a milestone and get some kind of reward, like as we were working towards it. I know that's not
I mean,
your specific part in any of this, but going back onto what you were saying about the global market, it, I I personally feel that that this game is pushing a boundary in some ways and not pushing boundaries in other ways.
yeah, I
I know
mean,
there's probably games that are way more expensive, and there's probably games that are way more cheaper that don't last as long. And the experiment of trying to find that happy medium is it's uh it's tough. I'm not gonna say it's easy, but it's tough on some of us who might want to indulge in the product. Like like I said, I know this is not your department at all, but I just want to voice my concern personally. Like I want to support the game, I really do. Flame Chun Li was a great way to support the game. Um, I'm not gonna say Akuma was not a success at all. It's cool, it's flashy, it's everything everything you really want to see, but to actually take part in it was taxing for a lot of us.
no, I get it. I was gonna, just add on top of that, like, again, this doesn't like anything I say, right? I don't want people to say, like, oh, dang it, like, this is bad. If anything, it's good news because with the game going the route it is, this will shine to the companies all around that, like, hey, we need to keep this game thriving because it's thriving right now. So obviously, because the game is doing super well, that's a good sign. So that's why, like game feedback, I consistently mention it because I do send that every week. So if there's specific things that you mentioned, for example, like if I were you guys, like I would try to, brainstorm some really good idea, say, hey, you guys did a really good thing on the Monster Hunter Ken event and the Akuma event. This was an issue here. So how can we get both of these events together? Like if you're able to make something detailed and gain feedback like that, get people to support it. Oh man, I'm down to push the initiative, right? Like that's my role. That's why I'm here. That's actually why they like for the record for people curious, like Crunchyroll Games was the specific company slash Sony to hire me. And the reason why is because they do care about community. So because of that, that's why I'm here. That's why there's a Discord. That's why I'm trying my best to see what you guys are saying. And that's why I'm pushing the narrative of game feedback because it's the best way for me to take the strong minority of social media people who's on Discord, Twitter, etc., add it all together and show to them like, hey, even though we have 20,000 people in Discord, that's still a really good sample size. And here's how many people, just by a single comment, agreed with this person. Look at that. It has 70 upvotes. It's 70 people that agree with this one person. And, again, like that's one of the things I'm doing. Like I'm introducing small things to make you guys way more heard than on other games. Because again, I understand completely. Like depending
Do
on
we have
what,
a
yeah, what's up?
oh sorry. No, do we have a metric on Reddit users? Like just in general? Because with like I feel like so you spoke about I believe Fantasy Star Online and their community of like 50,000 active players and it's still surviving. We have 30,000 on Discord. You know, how do we reach more players to interact in a community instead of leaving it up to chance that they're going to try and pursue different avenues of information. Like the reason why there's a Discord in general, like in any game, is the information. How do you get information about your game? How do you get better at your game? How do you find people to help you on things that require more than one player? That's that's primarily what I have Discord for is gaming and allowing myself to expand my horizons in gaming. Well, you know, I took a I took a little trip down to Reddit, and it's just like I think these guys need help to kind of learn what we know in Discord and what you're talking about is important too. Like the how do we reach more hubs and are we is there an attempt to try and get Reddit involved
That was your
or are we
first mistake. Your first mistake was going to Reddit in the first place.
Well, I mean,
you know, nothing is a lost cause, though, right? Like it's already tipped into such a cross media type of avenue, but there's still people that go there for information. There's still people that will search Street Fighter Duel on Google, and the first thing that usually pops up are YouTube videos or ads or the official website and Reddit. So and Twitter and Facebook. But you know, the Facebook interaction and the Twitter interactions are limited, right? So a single user can talk to another single user in a one-on-one format most of the time, or you're jumping into the comment section hoping to learn something or hoping not to get into an argument. But here in this open forum you've said it already, just the Discord community is really pushing along in a very positive way. We're getting a lot of good feedback from other players. We're learning a lot of great information, but I feel bad for the people who are getting stuck in the swamp or getting stuck in the mud in other places. But to suggest that you have to download another app like Discord and make another account and stuff like that, it's it's easy for me. It's easy for me because I've already had it, but for the people that might not have it, we've got to try and reach out to them and get them involved because the game, like Donald said, the game feedback is everything, right? And I haven't posted game feedback in a while. I've just been more observant on what other people are saying, just so I might say the same things. But I'm probably going to draft up something this quarter to try and get what I feel should be said about the game in that format.
yeah,
But
I mean,
by and large, to wrap up this rank, this like, how are we to get people more involved in what we're doing here? But I feel like this is really the front lines of what where this game is going.
yeah, I mean, that's really good. Like, for firstly, really appreciate you being detailed with that. So with Reddit, right? Um, the Reddit owner, I mean, I've been talking to him here and there. He himself is not too active around the Reddit, which is kind of unfortunate, but I kind of get it. But there is a join Discord option that will lead people. So if you go to the Reddit, it says join Facebook group. I think this was something that Reddit community person did. They're not affiliated by us. For those that are curious, they have a Facebook group, but then they also added a Discord because I asked them, guys, it'd be great for these Reddit people to join the Discord if they're not in it, etc. So in that regard, it is an option. There is about 9,000 some odd people in that Reddit. I think the one thing that with Reddit that is super difficult is I think the way that the Reddit has been treated so far, what people have been seeing on Gotcha Gaming, what people have been seeing on Street Fighter Duel, etc., it's almost as if like if you're not hip don't comment. And I think people are kind of afraid to mention some of the things that I've been saying. So, for example, I've been talking about the exclusive units thing for months, and I have not seen one person on Reddit post about it. But I know they're on the Reddit because the people on Reddit are very vocal about what their Discord account is. And they're very well aware of this information and they just don't post about it. But they decide to post kind of like doom and gloom posts instead of saying, hey, like there's going to be exclusive units coming to this game. There's going to be a survey, guys, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody talks about that on Reddit. And that's, I think, the biggest issue is that the Reddits kind of have turned into like a outlet for people to just scream and say like, "Hey, the game isn't what I want it to be," etc. And I totally get it. Like, people are not too happy with how the game is, and that's not something that I'm saying I'm oblivious to. Like, even though the numbers are great, like, guys, you got to understand me. I'm a person, right? The numbers are great. I'm not lying to you. Like, it's actually doing fairly well as a game. How it's being posted and portrayed on the Reddit, for example, I can see that there is still a lot of people that are not too happy with the game. Like, I can understand that. That's my job. As somebody who's in community, I have to understand both those things, right? So I have to understand that the game is still doing well, but there is this other aspect of it's a very vocal community online that is obviously saying they want changes to the game. I get it. That's why I do my reports. That's why I try my best to get people in Discord, etc. Like the Discord itself is doing fairly well. I mean, we're almost at 20,000. And you mentioned like Fantasy Star Online 2, which was a game that we worked on. Keep in mind, like when this was when I was at Sega, that game has been around for 3.5 years or something along those lines for global. Japan side, it's been around for 10 years. Their Discord server is at 22,000 members. This Discord server is almost equal to that Discord server in less than 2 months. So if that's not telling you something, it should.
No, that's good information. But well, the message is there is active there is an equal and active amount of community members between the two servers on Discord and Fantasy Star online succeeding globally, at the 3.5 year mark. Also, to point out what you were saying about the people who are posting on Reddit, I'm a firm believer that if say your piece, because and everybody should have an opportunity to say their piece about the game and whatnot. But to constantly do it is definition of insanity, right? But at the same time, if the the constructive minority of some of the other users that might have good ideas or things like that, I would like to see them come from Reddit to come here and say, "Hey, I'm from Reddit. I like what we're doing here." Blah blah. We play the game that we like because we have such a deep emotional connection to the Street Fighter. It's a game that's been around for everybody's childhood. Um, and I think the reason why discussions are so driven is because of our emotional connection to the property. That being said, we would like to see it go in a different direction as opposed to what Crunchyroll has done in the past. I hate to bring it up, but it it was definitely a shock to learn what was happening prior to this game's release. But I'm hopeful that things are gonna change. I'll probably try and do better in the game feedback again. I'll continue to help the community members in here. Um, and all of the information that you've given today is excellent, and I think it's a great example of what this kind of open dialogue can achieve. But I think we would prefer to I should say I would prefer to see some of this kind of stuff in the developer notes if you can re- get their attention to things. Like you said, it's got to come from game feedback, and I'll draft something up. But the developer notes and things like that, if they're kind of just they're steering the ship without really telling us where we're going, so to speak. I mean, it's not to say that I'm disappointed at what I'm seeing, but we're not really dropping anchor and figuring out what we're looking at yet. It'll come really quickly with little uh details, and but the devil's in the details also. I know that, but the developer notes, the patch notes, these kinds of issues that we have in the game discussion, some acknowledgement from the developers or um, some transparency on the topics of issues would be great too. I know it's a lot to ask from you, just you, but I think a good majority of us agree that the patch notes and the developer notes have not been satisfactory, even if our expectations are a little bit too high or may not be too high enough. There's just nothing to go on at time. But like I said, not your job, but if you can relay the message, that's great.
Yeah, I mean,
So
oh,
I
one,
just wanted to add something to
yeah,
before you could continue with that because because I think you could maybe speak on this because you said that the Smurf mentioned that the game you mentioned that the game is doing well now. Um, is it and you said that it's exceeding expectations. Do you see it or does the team see it as like an upward or a good trend, or does the team see it as a plateau or a downward trend? Because he mentioned something like, um, if it's doing good now, in 3 months it'll be doing okay, and then in 6 to 12 months it'll probably be done, and that maybe Crunchyroll will axe it. Can you like respond to some like those ideas? Because a lot of people do tend to see like,
I
oh
don't
yeah, it's doing now, but later on
I
it's gonna
don't
be dead.
I don't mean to cut you off here. It's a good question and a good observation, but I like we have to understand like what is the answer we're actually looking for with a question like that.
I mean, that is, I
Like,
guess it's your. I guess
yeah,
what people are asking is more of like, alleviating their fears of the future.
I think the other the I think we can ask the question in a different way. I think with I know I'm talking about surveys, right? So I feel that with the survey coming up and and that's gonna serve as really a benchmark of what the developers and Crunchyroll are gonna decide to do with the global game. So I would say uh, I personally will probably give the survey a chance to flourish first before I really decide if I'm going to keep playing or not. I'm definitely going to keep playing. I like this game too much to stop playing. I don't like the game enough to spend money at the metrics that they're offering at this time. But I think I don't mean to cut you off on your question or anybody else's question, but the ask for a 6 month or a 1 year forecast on the game right now is it's a tough sell. Like I wouldn't even know how to answer that question
Yeah,
other
well,
than
that's definitely
we
the
just
thing.
gotta
Because
hold and wait for it.
no, I definitely agree. I think the like I agree on the point. Maybe the question, the way it was worded, is definitely wrong. Because I'm not necessarily asking for a forecast as like, like prophesying what it could be. I guess it's just more of like, I mentioned, I think it was in the last podcast that the good news and like the player base and how it's being high and everything like that. I kind of I use the Trojan horse analogy where it's like it's a wonderful present. It looks amazing at first, but like deep inside it's going to be rotten where like,
Let's
it's going to disappear real quick.
let's think about it this way. What kind of protocols are in place if the game starts to decline? That's the kind of question that I would ask.
That's
But
a really
you
good
know,
question.
yeah, but I don't think I wouldn't expect anyone to know the answer to that question. But I'm sure that they probably got something in the bag if in case something takes a turn.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer this the best I can. So from what I know, especially like for the game, what's happening and things like that, because it exceeded expectations, that's actually a really good thing. And I mentioned that time and time again. But how we're handling this game, you guys have noticed that the first event was Monster Hunter Ken, the second one is going to be Dante. I mean, you can count Akuma as a third. Um, but in reality, there's so many characters that we still have to bring over that there's going to be a lot of content for 2 years at least in the stuff to bring from other versions. That's 2 years of content that already exists in other versions, right? So because we have that and know that, there is going to be collaborations within all of that that doesn't exist in those regions, right? So when you add up all the new characters we'll be adding as time goes on, all the collaborations, exclusives that are not in the Chinese version or in the Taiwanese version, coming to these versions for Crunchyroll games and A plus as time goes on, there's a lot of content. So for those that are curious, like where's the content going, that's not something you should worry about, especially from the things that I've been saying. I've mentioned this even like the first day the game launched, actually even during pre-registration days. But we have a kind of like an operation schedule, and we're able to look at like what do we expect coming out in this month, what do we expect coming out in that month. Sometimes it gets shifted around, which is exactly why we don't give 2 or 3 month advance notices of what character is coming or what collaboration is coming so soon, because it might get pushed back because we might add in a different unit, etc. Because there's so many units, there's so many events that we're going to incorporate in the game that it's going to last for a very long time, especially with what we're projecting this game to be. So to kind of go back into the other thing that you mentioned, I want to bring light to it because it's important, right? You guys have noticed, like, Crunchyroll games, the other games that's been happening, etc. If it makes it, if this makes you feel better, a lot of those games were pre-Sony days. So this was when Sony had nothing to do with Crunchyroll. If nobody knows what's up, Crunchyroll was recently purchased by Sony not too long ago. And we're part of the Sony group, right? So because of that, Street Fighter is part of that. I don't think Crunchyroll Games solely would have had the IP if it wasn't for the help of Sony. I truly don't think so. So mixing with that, the plans for the future of this game and how it's run, etc., is so different from the titles that you guys seen. So there was a lot of like information. I can't go into detail with what happened with Princess Connect, for example, which is unfortunate. But with that game, I will tell you, I've read every single Reddit comment. I've listened to every single YouTube video. I've went through Google. I went through Discord, and I'm going to tell you this: not even one person got it correct as to why that game shut down. So keep that in mind too. There was definitely a lot that happened for that shutdown that a lot of players have no idea why that was the case. Because again, Crunchyroll Games, I guess the only thing I can say about it is Crunchyroll Games is fairly new. And by the time that Crunchyroll Games was getting invested into games, Princess Connect was like the baby to really help Crunchyroll Games hit the map, because that was like the first title that Crunchyroll Games used to amplify the brand, which was Princess Connect. So understanding what kinds of things the team at that time might have had to go through to get that title, I mean, you can kind of think for yourself what might have been the issue. So, I mean, I can't fully blatantly say anything. This is all like internal stuff, but no one has guessed right. So, the other thing that I want to add on top of that is each of the games that you guys are seeing, right? As we've mentioned time and time again, Crunchyroll Games, A plus, for example, we're not developers. We don't develop the game. We're publishers. So for the games, for example, that shut down, you guys can go back and look. A lot of people bring up like the Naruto one, for example. Well, that's a different circumstance, right? Because Bandai Namco was in charge of the Japanese version of the game, while Crunchyroll Games had the license for like the global parts. But the Bandai Namco game was actually the one that fully shut down in conjunction to that Crunchyroll Games version, right? So understanding that, when you think of it in that aspect, that's not a Crunchyroll game shutdown. That was kind of like a full project shutdown in a way, because Bandai also shut it down, right? But I don't expect people to know those details. Those are things that it was announced publicly in press. So when people saw that the game was shutting down, that wasn't just Crunchyroll Games. That was also Bandai Namco in this case too, that shut it down. So, adding all of those elements together, understanding that each of the titles we work on is not the same developers. That's also an important aspect to understand, because again, these are IP that's licensed from Japan that we're bringing over to the global versions of the games. And they're different developers for each game. It's not the same developers for each title. And that was it's kind of interesting, because Sega was that in a way, but Sega was different because a lot of the IP that we were working with was already Sega owned. But I will tell you guys that each game that exists within like games as a service, each of those teams are different. So like we're talking to different reps from Japan for each different game. Like it's not like one guy that's in charge of all of the titles. It's one guy who's charge of all of that specific title. That's a different meeting, a different team completely. The other title, different meeting, different team completely. It's completely different teams for every single project. So it's important to understand that, but I don't expect players to know that. It's just take the information you see from the public with a grain of salt, because a lot of those people that do say that information, they've never worked in the industry to be able to see what I've been seeing, or what I understand was the pitfall in this case for a lot of the troublesome that happened with games, right? So it's always good to go to people working in the industry who might be able to explain things better to you. For example, I'm going to go back to a Reddit post, and I linked this to the content creators and in one of our private channels, which was just for creators, but I want to talk about it here. There was a Reddit post from somebody who mentioned the Konosuba Fantastic Days. I'm not sure if anybody's played that mobile game, but Nexon was the publisher of that game, right? And the CM at the time created like a Discord message to somebody, because somebody was asking them similar questions like you guys. It's like, oh, you guys are the publisher, you guys have so much power, etc. And the CM told them like, well, actually, we're not the developers. The developers are in Japan, completely different team, etc., etc. So I have to go ask them whether we can talk about stuff, etc. It went with that approach. And I read the comments, like I read what people were saying on Reddit, and everybody was like, oh, right, of course, who doesn't know that, right? So when I hear that and I see that, it's like, so if somebody made the same exact comment about Street Fighter Duel, people would understand that. That doesn't make sense, because you guys are still pointing at Crunchyroll Games as the developer of the game when that's not true. You see where like the issue is? So it's like people are playing that they know, but they don't know. So understanding that aspect too, like take everything with a grain of salt, like everything that you see online, all that stuff. A lot of these people have no idea what happens in the inside, and I'm willing to give you guys some of that information. I wish I could give more, but I can't go into detail for a lot of stuff. But I will say there's a reason for everything. But nobody on Reddit, nobody on Twitter, nobody on YouTube has really pinpointed exactly why games happen the way they do. So understanding all of that, I don't know, it's just funny, because once we give an answer, just like the Nexon thing that I brought up to you guys, like the CM was basically saying the Konosuba IP, that's a completely different IP owner, it's Japan, etc., and that Nexon doesn't really have the power for the title to do any of the things that players are doing. But the CM kind of made it broad, because again, he's probably not sure what he can or can't say. I get it, you know. So for him, he had to kind of tell people like, okay, we'll send this to Japan to see if they're going to approve it, and there might be an answer, but there might not be an answer. So yeah, like they were in the same circumstance. They're just a publisher for that specific title. For example, I think they're not anymore. I think there was some news recently that they stopped publishing the game, but the developers might be taking over. But anyway, like Nexon didn't have the power for that specific title. They have power for stuff like Maple Story. I think they own the IP, right? So they own the IP, they develop the IP, they even publish it. So that's why Maple Story has been long as it's been, because they have all the power and rights to a game like that. And the game does pretty well. So add all that together, it makes sense why that game lasts for as long as it does. But that's not for every title. You know, there's specifics for every single title that, you know, people don't really look into. And I don't expect, you know, I don't expect people to look into that, honestly. As a player, I don't expect you to know that. But since it always, you know, as players, those questions do pop up, at that point, it's like, okay, we probably need to give you guys an answer. Even though me as a player, for example, like when I play games casually. I don't join the communities for it. Most of the games I play, like RuneScape, for example, that's actually a game that I mentioned that I play a lot. That you know that one I don't really like. Like I see what the community stuff is doing. They do polls, they do all this great stuff, but like I'm not invested like that. Like I understand like whatever the team is going through, there's something happening internally for all that to happen the way it is. So I'm not going to criticize the game because I understand what's going on. Obviously, would I love changes as a player? Absolutely. I mean, there's some stuff in RuneScape that I wish was back. I miss pre EOC. Anybody who plays RuneScape, you probably know what I'm talking about. I missed pre EOC. Is that going to come back? I don't think so. Like that was my bread and butter for RuneScape. So, but am I going to be the person that's going to consistently complain about that and say, "Oh my God, it's never coming back"? I'm not going to do that because I understand the reason behind why they might have not been able to do that and bring that back to what that year was, because again, the game was looking for profits. So what was the biggest point and success that RuneScape did and that they had files for was 2007. So I get that. I understand that. You know, there is a reason behind all of the things, but I don't expect players to know that. But that was kind of like me being a little too much information there. But hopefully you guys appreciate it. I'm down to continue talking. But I want you guys to know that because as players, it's super important to know that, even though it feels like you shouldn't know that. But it has come to the conclusion for me, at least, that the players do want to know that. So it's like, okay, here's some, you know, here's an idea of what's going on. It's not foolproof of every single title you're seeing, but it's important to know the relationship for every title you as a player are going to get involved in. You should you should kind of understand the circumstance of what you're going to get into. You know, so like for me, when I played, I also played that Konosuba Fantastic. I knew what I was getting into. I knew that game, you know, it's doing fairly well. It's actually been out for a bit. It might eventually shut down here soon. A lot of mobile games have. Actually, this year, it's been a huge shutdown of a lot of mobile games. Every mobile game will shut down eventually. But when I get into that game, I understand the relationship because I work in the industry. It's like, okay, Nexon's the publisher, the developer, somebody nobody really talks about because a lot of people in the communities don't understand that the developer is actually the one who kind of almost calls the shots on a lot of stuff, even though that's how the community sees it. To me personally, I don't see it like that because of me giving you this information. It's just that it's a partnership and how the companies view those partnerships. It's like the partner who owns the game, they're the ones that's developing it. They're the one they themselves know the product more than anyone. They know them more than us, they know more than you, they know, etc. So that's how we view it as a partner, right? So that's a different relationship. We don't manage the developers. The developers manage themselves. The developers let us know, like, hey, this is what's happening this day. And they might switch it up. And then we, you know, talk to them. And then they're saying, oh, yeah, we made that change. Right. So that might be after the fact that we know. That's kind of how you guys have to understand what's going on, you know, in those aspects, and it happens in a lot of games. Happens in a lot of games. So it's good to know that.
Well, I have to, from a player, I will honestly say that this is more concerning than relieving, to be 100%. Because when I hear about previous games, to be honest, I didn't dabble in any of those games, including RuneScape. But when I hear about those previous games and people on Twitter are getting it wrong, and then people on Reddit are getting it wrong, YouTubers getting it wrong, this, that, and the other, right? Um, no one is stepping in to correct them. And I feel like if the idea was on the player experience rather than the monetization, then someone along the lines would stop that when it happens and be like, hey, hold on now. That's not what happened. That's not why this game shut down. Here's why it shut down. This is as much as I can tell you, this, that, and the other. And then this is why. But the players are left in the dark. And when a player is passionate about a game, he wants to play a game, and something happens with that game or that game shuts down, he wants to know. And there's nowhere that he can go to get that information. So he goes on YouTube, he goes on Twitter, he goes on Reddit, and then they're telling him this, that, and the other. This is the reason the game shut down. This is why I think the game shut down. And that's all the information that they have to go off of. Um, and if nobody's stepping in to correct that information, if, you, as a developer or a publisher, you know that information's wrong, not saying you, but, in the situation of a game that shuts down or whatever, and they're not stepping in to say, hey, that's not why this game went down. This is not why the ship crashed. This is what happened. This is why it happened. This is how it happened. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Don't believe these other guys. Then I'm left to believe what I have. And in most scenarios, what I have is they didn't care about the game. If the game got shut down after 6, 7 months, oh, they got their money and they dipped. And there's no one to say, hey, no, we actually tried on this game, but this is what happened. That's what happened. We couldn't support it anymore because the monetization did this or whatever it may be. But nobody's stepping in to kind of correct that information. So to have you here is great, but it's also concerning kind of in the broader sense that in this game where someone isn't in the Discord, like you were saying, they're on Reddit or they're on Twitter that are just, posting events and not really saying anything about the state or the health of the game, they're left to their own devices. And their own devices are innately pessimistic because, to be honest with you, that's kind of what it looks like. If I joined the Monster Hunter Kin event because of this, commercial that came on, or I saw it, my friend was playing the game, and then I come in and I see, let's call it like it is, it was a very whale-based event. And I think to myself, well, hold on, why did they do that? Why was the event created like this? And the only thing I have is this pessimistic YouTuber saying they only care about your money, don't play this game, this, that, and the other. And nobody's stepping in to go, hey, now hold on now. It wasn't the publisher's idea to do this. This is why it happened this way. This is the idea of it. Then I'm just left to my own devices. I look at that video and I go, well, I mean, this is all I have. This is all they're thinking. Clearly, they don't care about me. I'm just going to take my stuff and I'm going to pack up and I'm going to move to another game. So, all I had to really say that, I don't know if there's really a question here, but more of a statement. How do you, as the publisher and someone working on the game, get that information out? Like, to be straight up, if the developer is the one that has the final say, I wouldn't put anything on you. I would like to hear the developer tell me this is the reason why they did this. This is the reason why they did that. Because then that shows me that that developer cares about the player experience. And it's not really, where the point is monetization, but they still want the game to be good. But when I hear radio silence, there's no like community panel or like no in-game resources to get this type of information, then as a player without any of that information, the only thing that I can conclude is that they only care about my money. So how do you, is there a way that you can connect that bridge? Is there a way that you can get them to start communicating more with us as the community in general?
Yeah. So no, that's a great question. That's actually why gaming companies hire community managers in the first place, to try to help bridge that. That's actually the whole purpose. As to how that happens, how long it happens, etc., it's a process. And I want to like shine some light on what you said. It's like, okay, if a YouTuber says this, if a person says this, yada yada, I'm going to tell you from industry experience what goes on. Obviously, us behind the scenes, we're not going to say anything because as how we view partnerships, right? It's not because, okay, for example, let's say you I don't know, you work with a YouTuber. I'm going to go into that aspect, the basics of that. You work with another YouTuber, and you guys do like some sort of podcast or whatever together per week, yada yada, and then all of a sudden the podcast didn't go out, and then you tell your viewers that it was their fault that the podcast didn't come out. No, you wouldn't say that. I mean, if you did, I kind of question you as a person. But,
Right.
That's the same aspect. It's like, this is my partner. At the end of the day, I'm not going to say they're the fault, because in reality, they're just doing their job, because their job is just to develop the game. We as publishers, our job is to publish the game, give you guys the regions, all those to participate in the regions they are. That's the basis of a publisher. The publisher wants to give more people the opportunity to play something. So that's their goal, and obviously to monetize off of that, and hopefully have the game around, which is not it's not a publishers don't want to just shut down these games. That's another thing. Like, they don't want to just shut down these games, they want it to be successful. So there's that aspect. At the end of the day, how Japanese games are, the development teams, a lot of the developers in Japan, they like to kind of keep to themselves. They're not really public in that regard. That's not something they do. They're just doing their job. They're working on the games. That's just kind of like something we see in the industry. They are not meant to be the public facing person. If they were public facing, you wouldn't see me here. You wouldn't see popular community managers in other games, because that's why we exist. We exist because we're getting information from them, because the developers are not the public facing brand, they're not the public facing individual. They're just developing the game, and that's their job. They don't want to hear, and no offense, guys, they don't want to hear from you in that way. They want you to go through me. That's just how it is in the industry. They want you to go through me. All of that, I take that feedback that you guys give and I send it in the most polite way possible to my partner. I give them that feedback in a polite way. They don't want you guys, for example, barging in and saying, this and that, because I've seen a lot of that about me. So would a developer want to see that about them? I don't blame them. No, absolutely not. I wouldn't want them to be targeted. I'll take the heat. That's fine. Because at the end of the day, I know that's not my choice of how the game works or how the game. That's cool with me. It's whatever. I'll take it. But that's just how it is. That's the industry. That's just the way it is, and we don't expect the developer to be public. So, like, for example, there was some dev updates, and we want to do more of that. But from the developer things, like, this is something that we're writing, right? So the developers tell us some information, and then we put some stuff, and there it is. I mean, we can do that more often, but the thing is, we've been trying to get the developers to help us out with the update notes, and I think you guys have seen it. I think Sir Zangief also mentioned this too, is the update notes haven't been up to par, but in reality, I mean, guys, it did improve. Because if we were to look back as to what the update notes were when the game started, I'll be honest with you too, like, it definitely needed work. There was like nothing. But there is stuff now. And that's why I told everybody weeks ago that this is a slow process. We'll get there. We'll get there where it becomes a little bit longer each update note. But we haven't hit that yet, but we're getting there. It's slowly starting to be a thing. But with that, it's not that the developers are hiding anything. That's the other thing I want to clear up with people. The developers are not hiding anything. They're working what they're working, and the things that they write, it's not essentially their job to do that. So this is like an extra thing we're asking them to do. Like, hey, we would really love for you guys to write a lot of this stuff because the community's asking for it. Like, because the community is asking for it, we would love to have this, because to me, and even the product owner for this game, we really want you guys to have information. So that's why, like, the moment the Monster Hunter Ken event, like the moment that was ending, and things in that. We did say communication was the number one thing we got to fix, and that's still true to this day. And we're doing it slowly but surely. So, to answer all of those questions into one, like, the developers, they're not supposed to be the public facing team. They never will be in that regard. There is some games that, that might be a thing, but you guys got to remember from what I said, a few talks before, like, what's the relationship on the game, right? There's been people that have said, "Oh, I've seen a gotcha game last for." It's funny because I actually talked about this in the Creator Club channel, and one of them was saying, I told them like how Dokkan was the longest licensed game. It's been almost like what 7, 8 years or something, and then they brought up like a Square Enix game, and I was like, it's not licensed. That's owned by Square. The IP is owned by Square. This and that. That's not essentially licensed. Like it is, but it's not. It's still owned by the company. So there's so many fees that don't apply to them that helps them keep the game going for how long it's going. You know. So when somebody says that, it's like, well, that's not that, right? So I don't know. There's things with like the development, how they work, etc. Like they're not meant to be public facing. That's why there is community manager roles that exist. To grow the community, build the community, try to give you guys as much information as I can. All that stuff in between. Like that's the job of a community manager. So it's just when people kind of blame like the wrong people, it's gonna happen. I mean, I get it, whatever. I'm not too pressed about it, but it's just one of those things where I kind of hope that the can help us out a little bit. But I understand why the community doesn't want to, because it's like, for example, we talked about this earlier. Reddit, everybody is kind of expecting that if you say anything nice about the game, you're gonna get slammed on Reddit. So that's why I understand why people don't do that. And even the content creators, it's kind of tough for them to want to do that because again there's this mob mentality that the moment you voice something on something like Reddit that's positive, everybody's going to look at you like, what? So that's why I think a lot of people don't talk about the stuff that I mentioned, like exclusive collaboration units that won't exist in the CN version or the TW version, which is true. Like we will have exclusive units that won't be from those games. We will have collaborations that won't be from those games. We are going to have a survey that's going to come out in game very soon that's going to ask players what they like. There's going to be a list of like TV series, celebrities, all that stuff. What is your involvement in Street Fighter Duel? Have you paid anything? It's going to be a very detailed survey. And I suggest people to fill that out once it happens. I'm not sure like when it's going to fully hit, but I actually seen it today. And the survey is pretty detailed. It might be edited slightly, but it's very detailed and it's things to be excited for. So there is plans, there is things like that. And, in general, what I'm telling you all is this game will get better as time goes on. If you're somebody that's, complaining that there's not many factions that's coming into the general pool, don't worry. There will be more units that will be in the general pool. I'm telling you 100%. If you want me to confirm to you 100%, I will confirm it to you here. 100%, there will be more units added to the general pool. At the rate, though, I can't confirm that because I have no. But it's been a topic. Don't worry about that. There will be more units in the general pool. But there will also be more units in the special summon and divination. So understanding that there will be a lot of characters that free-to-play players will be able to utilize. Will free-to-play players be able to utilize all of the characters? That's a different story. That, I'm going to have to tell you no for now. I don't know if that changes in the future, but, if we're, how the game came out was like 40 characters. There has been like Street Poisons coming out. There will be another one after Dante that will be coming out, and I think that one will be in the general. So there will be characters that will be coming to the general pool. So I just want to like push that narrative too, because it does kind of feel like people are like, oh, it's just Infernal, it's just Master. etc. No, don't worry. It's not going to be just those. There will be a lot more added to the pool. We just ask for your patience because, again, I don't know when the devs are going to add this stuff, but I do know it's happening. It's going to happen. You just need to be more patient and just play the game as I mentioned. Like, don't go too hardcore with it. I mean, if you want to, go ahead. But I've always told people play the game for like an hour or 2 hours max a day. Like, I don't want you to go crazy. It's kind of weird for a community person to say that. Like, why would you tell people not to play the game? It's just because you're going to hit these roadblocks that really you shouldn't be getting into so quickly at the rate that you are. But I know that the fear of missing out exists. I know that all that stuff exists. Like, I get it, totally understand. But in reality, this is a game that you should only be playing for like an hour or two while you play other stuff as well. So I don't know. I think the thing is, a lot of players have been really excited with the game and they like the game. That's why they're putting so many hours into the game, which has made them progress so long and so much that they're coming into some hard stops where it's like they're using the same meta as somebody else. I get it. There will be more characters. So don't worry. Like, me as a community manager, I understand exactly like what you guys want, what you guys are looking for, etc. What you guys are looking for is definitely going to happen, but it's one of those things where you have to be patient. I can't I can't reassure you any other way. It's not something I can do. I can't tell you a unit is coming out tomorrow. Not. That's not my call. The development team has a call of when they release units every day. Well, I say every day because in the schedule and what we're seeing, they're able to change how a unit comes out. So instead of it coming out in May that we were, looking to have a unit in, it might be extended to July. So, again, there is things that will be coming out. The rate that it comes out, I'm not sure. But it will be as time goes on. It's just one of those things that you have to really be patient with.
I I know. Thank you for the time, man. Can you hear me? Just
Yeah, of
checking.
course. Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem at all. What's up, dude?
My biggest thing, I posted something in the chat about being censored and all. I know I fully understand now that it takes a dev communication. So I'm grateful for this that you're explaining all this. I want to play this game for 5 years, man. When I play a game, I want to love it forever. And like I played other gotchas like that Star Wars Galaxy one and all, but it never hit home. But this game really hits home, man. I mean, it's hitting back to the 90s, and I want to play it legit for at least 5 years. And my budget on this is high. I mean, I know others are too, but 500 a month is what I've negotiated with my wife. Like, we're gonna spend it. I'm gonna spend it and help to keep the game going, man. All I want to, I ask for, the only thing I ask for, man, is that you guys keep it going, and that's like my number one fear in this, and I think a lot of other people. And then if you guys just like. You guys say, hey, we have a 5 year plan. We do want to keep it. Like, you get that commitment from devs. Like, these guys want it around. That would make us all feel so much better. And also, like, the MG Ken, like, I feel left out that I didn't get to enjoy it because I joined like a week after he wasn't around anymore. And so in the future, if maybe like in a year, like annually, you're like, hey, we're gonna surprise bring this guy back. I mean, that would be sweet to a lot of guys that missed out, not because they didn't want to, just because they didn't even know the game existed. I mean, and my name's Ken, so I'm like kind of set for the guy, you know.
Yo, Kenny, can I be your wife? 500. I'll take half of that.
You gotta fall in line, man. No, no. I just say, man, I really love the game, and I do hope the best for it. And I'll stop posting like somewhat on the meaner side of my requests. But I do want to see the best for it, and I'm grateful that you're spending the time to do this because I've never seen a game do this to this level, honestly, where you guys are improving so quickly. As soon as the game comes out, every game's gonna have issues, but you guys are really like I see the benefits instantly on how well you are reacting and how well you've improved the game. Like when there's glitches in the game, like I've never seen devs or teams handle things so quickly. So I want to give you applause for how well you're handling the game. And how well you're treating us, and I want the devs to know that too. That like we like it matters a lot on how well things are happening. I mean, I've never seen a game like this ever, and I played WoW and I spent money on that, right? But I've never seen teams like this react so quickly, and just be in contact with the customers. So I'm just thankful. I'm very thankful, and I just if you all just tell the devs like number one, have a 5 year plan because that's how much I want. Like I think most of the people want to be around doing this like a long time.
Oh yeah, man. Hey, first off, I just want to say, like, I could tell from your voice and how you're talking about this and stuff, that has like rejuvenated me. Because I don't really hear that type of love for something in this way. So I just want to say thank you for that. That means a lot.
Well,
Me
I
personally,
love this game. I really
yeah,
do.
dude, it's like, okay, first off, I'm a huge Street Fighter fan. I'm sure most of you are. Like the IP itself is, something that I've grown up with. I'm sure a lot of you guys have either grown up with it or maybe you haven't. You love the recent stuff with Street Fighter and then Street Fighter 6 and that hype is going on. And there's so much excitement for that too. I will tell you that this game does have a long-term plan. Okay, like we do. I can't tell you the baseline years, but I will say years. There is a years attached to it that is the minimum years. It's the minimum. So if that helps out, the game is doing really well right now, and we expect that to continue to trend to do really well. The goals that we put for the first month, it did like 10 times more than we expected, both players wise and revenue. That was the exact same thing with the second month. So what we're projecting, that's actually why we're going to have a survey that's going to be coming out in game, in hopefully in a few weeks, max a month. There will be a survey that's going to ask you about your favorite TV shows, your favorite celebrities, your favorite anime, how much you spent in the game, how much have you not spent in the game, how many hours have you played the game. It's going to be really detailed. After you finish the survey, we'll get that information from you, and then also you'll get. I'm not sure what the rewards are, but you will be rewarded for doing the survey. But we'll take that information, and that's going to set up the types of collaborations we're adding to the game. So this is stuff that doesn't exist in the CN version, in the TW version. So there is plans. Like I'm not just saying that to say that. Like there 100% is plans. There's a lot of good stuff that's happening with the game. We're seeing a lot of great faces for the Devil May Cry announcement. So we had like a really big announcement for that. It's been doing really well on social media. Capcom has been super supportive of what we do. Actually, I'm really good friends with the manager of socials over there. Are actually pretty good friends. So he's been really promoting Street Fighter Duel. They even promoted it on the Devil May Cry account. So yeah, we're getting a lot of support from all angles. We're getting a lot of PR. So there is a lot of initiatives that we're doing on our front to make sure we're getting new players and that we're marketing the game well. Nanogenics, also a really big YouTuber in the Dragon Ball space. He's been doing videos. There's been so many other creators that have been posting tweets and videos and live streams and all that stuff supporting the game. Then also we have the creator program as well, where there is, Painblade and Sir Turtle and A Marky Mark and all of them creating some fantastic videos for the game. And then we have Discord community, which the Discord itself has been really phenomenal. It's been doing a really good job. So in terms of the game, its longevity, a bit, but as mentioned, and this is kind of like the history of Crunchyroll games, I think it's important to just understand that each game that we work on, it is different. It does involve different developers. It does involve a completely different IP. How things happen the way they do, unfortunately, does happen the way they do. Like, to give you 100% here, and this is not to like scare anyone, it's just good knowledge to have in the industry for any games you play. But a lot of people are like, okay, the publisher can make or break the game. Like they can say, yo, this game can go off the hook and we don't want to support it anymore. There's another aspect to it too. A developer at any point can stop developing the game. If they, like, for example, the devs, if we work for SMD, they could say tomorrow, who knows? Hey, we don't want to work on this game anymore. we're going to stop the Chinese version. We're going to stop the TW. We're shutting down tomorrow. Like, we're not going to support this anymore. They can all do that. Like, any team, any company can do that. Development teams can do that. They can say, we want to work on a different project. We'll work on a different project. We don't want to support this one anymore because we don't have the desire to keep working on it anymore. Even if the profits are good. That's just full transparency how the industry is. What I've seen happen, like a developer just quit. And that's just kind of it for it. With this one, however, the Street Fighter Duel devs for this game are hyped. They are a different level of developer I have witnessed. They are so dedicated to supporting their versions of the game. You know, the Crunchyroll Games version 8+. They're supporting all of these, and they're so pumped. Actually, they are.
You can see even if they're training servers, like they were kicking ass.
They have been working on those other versions really well. So that's the other thing, you know, that a lot of people don't see obviously internally, but you know, there's some devs that are like, oh yeah, we're motivated, but this team is like, yo, we're motivated. It's like a different level of like intensity coming from them. Like they want this to succeed. So if they want it to succeed, obviously the publisher wants to succeed. This publisher doesn't want to just randomly say, oh, we're going to throw this out. No. So we have really good partners in the devs. The people want communication, which we're going to fix. It's going to take some time since that team, you know, that development team, they're really worried about making sure the new content is good, making sure that in conjunction to the new content, all of the things that you guys are giving them requests for to fix, they have to fix that too. So keep in mind, it's new content. This game is brand new. They're putting out new content in conjunction to making the changes that you guys want. Obviously, that's not every single thing, but there's a lot of changes that, you know, needs to be implemented. And it has been, you know, here and there. People have been noticing some changes that they've talked about, you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago that got patched, or, you know, things like that. So it does take some time. Sadly, I wish I had that information so I could like tell people like, oh, this was what got patched. I don't even get that information. There's been a lot of like updates that like even like the really positive stuff, like, oh man, we got new modes, etc. It didn't show that in the update notes. I'm sure you guys have noticed that too. Like, what the heck? There's new modes, nothing in the update note. Like, that's another thing that I've been telling, like, you know, the development teams, like, we really need to give this information because people are saying like we're ignoring the negative stuff, but it's in reality it's not that. It's both the positive and the negative. We're just not voicing anything. So it's like even the good stuff that people like, we haven't gotten information for. So that's something that we have to work on with the developers. At the end of the day, the developer's job is to develop the game. It's not really to write anything. So we're asking kind of extra from them. And so far, they've done that in that regard, slowly but surely. But you know, it's just one of those things that we have to keep working on. But there is a big plan for this game, so I wouldn't worry about it too much, especially from what we're seeing. Like Street Fighter is a really strong IP. You know, obviously with the plans that we have for this IP, we do need to still see support for it. So as time goes on, it's just one of those things that anything can happen, but at the end of the day, we do have like a year's plan. Like this is not something that we're just bringing over and saying, oh, we have no plans. No, we have plans. You know, the developers are doing what they do and we're submitting feedback as we do, and there will be improvements. It's just up to the players at that point. Like it's really up to the players whether you want to be in the long haul or, you know, you're a person where it's like, oh dang it, like I get it. Some people are like first impression. So it's like, okay, Monster Hunter 10. Okay, Akuma. All right. I don't want to play anymore. I get it. That might be a lot of people. I get it. As time goes on, there will be other people that will replace them. So that's kind of how that is too. It's going to really depend on you as a person, what you're expecting. But I will tell you, just the way that the game is structured right now, it is one of those ones where it's like, it'd be good if you were for the long haul because as time goes on, it will get better. It's just, I don't want people to expect like, oh, it's going to happen tomorrow. Like that, I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. It might take a month. It might take 3 months. It might be 6 months until we finally get more updates to you guys that we've never given on the first day of stuff. So, hopefully that makes sense. We're trying, but the relationship is completely different. So,
Another point I've seen, when a game comes out, it's usually really crazy prices, and that's expected. I would just to see what the demand is. Can we expect prices to be like to become a little more reasonable, especially with the high rate of special characters being released? Like, I wouldn't mind continuing like paying, but man, like a lot of the whales are, even the big whales are like, wow, this just came out and I'm gonna have to pay a lot again. I don't know if I can do it. And that's the thing, another fear is that the high price points of these special characters, and they're so close together, versus having like a normal character in between, for a month versus that. That's another point I know is a big problem, is just the high price point. Like if for like half, like say I could max out a character all the way to the top, right? And it cost me under a grand. I think more people would feel better about that versus like it costing 2,500, like all the way up to, depending on what your roles are. Like that scares me even. Like,
no, I get it. So, with that, it seems like the development team made a interesting adjustment to one particular thing that recently came out. And you guys have probably noticed it. And that would be Flame Chun Li. So Flame Chun Li is an interesting one because you do have to think, you play a little bit, you earn some of the discount for it. You can also ask people to assist you. And at the end of it all, you could get it for $30 instead of 100. And on top of that, whatever, if you get it to that $30 point, I did hear because of their faction, because it's legendary, it can just attach to another unit, and then it can be like SSS plus 5 if you have a character that's SSS plus 5 or whatever. So like that's $30. That's actually a pretty good investment. So I think what the development teams are probably looking into is how many people are going to support Flame Chun-Li. That's what I think. I don't know the answer as to like if that's 100%, but from what we've been seeing and from what I'm looking into too, I think that discount exists because they want to see how many people would pay at the lowest price and if it can topple more than what is currently being paid. So, making sure that, there is obviously that would require more people to pay at the end of the day. Because if a whale does $1,000 and usually, and we are offering the Chun-Li 30, we would need more players who have not spent before to kind of match what you yourself did for $1,000, if that makes sense.
yeah, I do understand. The other problem though is that Flame Chun-Li is a bust. Like she's not good. But yeah, I understand that they made it easier and stuff, but she's not. She's honestly not that great. So she's a slow character, and her debuffs like for the opponents. They need to stack all the way up to 50, which you're dead. The game's done before you even get to that point. So I did it. I know a lot of other people that picked her up, but we're also like, she's sitting on the side now in the corner, like, so if they did that to a character like, say, a character of the power like Flame Blanco, or they decide, hey, we're gonna change Flame Chun-Li and change her numbers so that she's actually more usable, then yeah, I think more people would probably pick her up. But if that makes sense, I just gotta bring that up too.
I
No,
think
I,
that
yeah, I mean,
one thing I want to respond to that is it's like I think that's also something that's on the fine edge because like I've heard people where they're like, oh, like for example, Bison, where they're like, oh, some people are like, yeah, he's definitely worth $100. You should definitely buy it. And then other people are like, oh, why do I have to? All the busted units are $100. All the busted units are going to be paid. So like having those units that you buy that are good while also having those units that you buy are bad is the balance, and it should be both because like if it gets too saturated with a whole bunch all the expensive units are busted, I see a lot of people just being put off by that.
Yeah,
I like him.
that makes sense.
I
She's just not playable though.
Well,
well,
She's actually just
to some extent, to some people, because like as a fire user, she is playable.
as a fire user. I think she's useless.
yeah. Well, like I want to counterpoint with the out of respect to where other users might be in the game. So we to to bring up a point that we've always brought up. Different fighters have different impacts upon when you break them out of the box, so to speak. So like Monster Hunter Ken out of the box is great. Akuma out of the box not so great. You got to put some stuff into it. Jerry again, Rose, Bison, 100% confirmed a busted unit out of the box. But you look at a character like Flame Chun Li and the metrics at which players can approach to obtain her and what she might do for certain situations for players at different situations in the game. She's not entirely useless to let's say it's somebody at my level. I'm in the low 20s. I'm looking for another fighter who might give me that edge. Um, I'm looking at a fighter like Flame Chun Li to help me try and achieve something or to try and tool around with or try to use resource like because I let's face it, I don't have the resources to get my Sea Viper up to triple S with some stars. But my Dhalsim is triple S with 3-star triple S Dhalsim. And I got Fashion Blanca and I got a Chun Li that I can use to give me some kind of immediate impact on a DPS check, not necessarily using Elena for sustainability or different tanky units that I don't have investments in yet. The product itself is isn't so much what people are buying, but when people are buying it and to achieve what goal. So there's each unit has a goal that they achieve uh, when you're setting a lineup, or in in the content that we have now, like Super Showdown and other content that uses multiple teams. The having more accessibility to a tool is better than not having it. But to round go back around to the point was is Chun-Li is useless for you. And it might not be necessarily for you, but it might be useful for other people to use where they're at. But to throw a counterpoint and to agree with you at the same time, the metric for Chun-Li to obtain her is a lot better. If these kinds of options are provided to players who might not have that kind of access to liquid funds like that, it it could yield a better result for new players and longtime players. And I'll bring this around shortly. I'm looking at a Dante unit, and I'm a little scared because I don't have the gems available to me to buy the tickets, 3,000 gems daily for 3 pools. I'm excited for the free tickets that I'm going to get through the event, but I am not excited about the pool rate if it's close to a Kuma, if that makes sense. Like the 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 point I'm trying to make is every unit has its purpose. Every unit is either good out of the box or not, but every player has a different experience at the game at the level that they're at. And it does well to reach out to every single player, but there needs to be a balance. Like you said, there needs to be good units and bad units to achieve the what I'm talking about. But at the same time, there should be a way to create exclusivity but also attainability. Like with like coming up with Dante or Monster Hunter Ken was a great example. You brought it up. You started off a week after it came out, and I feel for you. I really do. Um, but like I don't. I have a Monster Hunter Ken at A. I use it sometimes, but not all the time. So it's and that was the free one that they gave me. Appreciate that by the way. Uh, but to go to now we're gonna transfer over to Dante and like if there was a way for whales to get Dante reliably at a certain price point, I feel like making 1,000 people happy uh for $100 a piece would be better instead of making 100 people happy at $1,000 a piece. I always bring this. I'll always bring this up. It's always better to make more people happy and make the same amount of money.
Yeah. Luigi had a question, so I'll let him go. But I wanted to add a counterpoint to. I would say Flame Chunky specifically, and then to a great extent fashion. But I'll let Luigi go first.
So hold on, hold on. What? Two people. There's Smurf wanted to. I don't know if he's willing to. He wanted to bring up a topic, and then Luigi, because I just want to make sure we're keeping the proper orders of who's requested to speak.
Right.
Okay, yeah, Mrs. Smurf. So I don't know, maybe I showed up late for the call, but I was curious to see what happened with the hidden pity that was in the divination system.
Speculation, right?
Yeah, so before this last patch, you could actually there was Scion has a good video on it where you could actually take the drop rate for the pity chart in the CN version. And I believe the polls were 30, 50, 90, 120, 150, and 200. You were pretty much guaranteed a pull from the divination. And I believe it was polls 90 and 150 that guaranteed you a double pull. And I actually followed that to the T all the way up to 120. And I was able to confirm that pity chart. So after this last patch, I read on Reddit that they got rid of it. I'm like, nah, it can't be true. They could have done that because it was a hidden video. It was never displayed like it was in CN. So I tested it. Other players tested it. And sure enough, it was gone. Like we created new accounts. We tried it and the pity wasn't there anymore. So can you elaborate more on that? I don't know if you have any knowledge about it and what kind of happened to it. Why did the developers decide to take it out?
Wait, is this a question for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I can't say anything about that. I mean, I kind of mentioned. I mean, this is before you were here, but Sir Turtle also mentioned this. I can't really comment on anything regarding that since I personally don't know or have had any information from devs on that particular topic. I know that's something that the community's been talking about, but I don't have any information I can give regarding that.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to mention is you kind of brought up that Flame Chun-Li, she was moved over as a legendary hero and it's a test run that the developers are doing. But other complaints people have had is like in the CN version, Flame Chun-Li was a flame unit. So she was actually helpful if you drew her from the general pool to help you out with the flame tower. But now it feels like people are kind of being forced to pay for a unit that used to be free in the general pool. And not only that, they can't no longer even use that unit in the actual flame tower like they were intending to do. So those are some of the drawbacks that we see based on, the changes that are made. I think the price is great. Like I have no problem with the price, but when you kind of compare it to like, well, she was in the general pool before, so she was kind of like free, and how you're being charged for it. And the same thing with Vega. Vega in the CN version, it was a flame unit. And now all of a sudden it's being changed to Inferno unit, which means it's a lot harder to get them, So when we start seeing those kind of changes, it starts making us think that, hey, the devs are getting kind of more greedy. So now we're taking units that were in the general pool and they're putting them either pay to play only, or they're putting them in the divination pool, which is a lot more expensive to pull.
Right. So when it comes to like just in general what you guys are seeing between different regions, just keep aware that those regions we don't operate, right? And because of that, each region has its own publisher. So for those that don't know, Tencent is the publisher for the CN version. There's things that obviously the publisher would like to keep exclusive on their version that won't be applied to our versions, right? That's business. That's part of things. So if there's something that Tencent, for example, doesn't want the global side, or not even global side, anybody who has versions. So first off, we're not even a global game. That's another thing that we have to tell others, because I know global is the term people use, and it's okay, but I just want you guys to know we, like as Crunchyroll Games and A+, we don't consider our versions as global. So we consider our versions as completely different versions, just like Tencent is just Chinese, we have the US, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's how we view it too. Like we're having our own region. So if there was a different publisher that was coming into play that other countries didn't have access to, like if we weren't supporting it, if Tencent wasn't supporting it, there could be another publisher involved that we have no idea about that might eventually come up and say, "Hey, we're going to publish in this country." That that's a possibility. We don't know about those deals though. So anyway, that's like a bigger picture of that. But there's things like units and how they come and the way that they're coming in. It might be exclusive just for that version. So that's like a call that usually the publishers make for their version. So for example, we're going to have exclusive units and we're going to have a survey that goes up in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe in a month, where you guys who come into the game, you'll be able to answer questions regarding your account, how many hours you play, how much money you've spent, any TV series you like, any anime show you like, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll get a lot of those questions, but any collaboration we make, like that won't happen in the CN version. They're not actually allowed to have that. So if they ever wanted to have that, including the fiction, etc., no, they're not going to be able to. That's just the way kind of like business is. So you got to have some differences, and that's why they're not operated the same way. So the versions that you guys are playing, which would be either Crunchyroll Games or A Plus, we're gonna have stuff that Tencent's not is not going to be able to touch for the CM version. Same as the Taiwanese. I'm not sure who the publishers are for that. That in general, I'm not like 100% sure. But that's just something to keep in mind. Like we're not. There's some characters where we're able to bring it over in the same way that they were, and then there's others where there's no way that we can because it has an exclusivity with the other version, right? So, that's something that we have to abide by those rules. We can't break those rules or we're not an official game anymore, right? Sorry, we're not like a licensed game anymore. It's kind of funny because, for example, and this is kind of off topic, like YouTubers that are covering gotcha games or something that is not licensed. That's actually not even an official game. And then they're kind of wording it like, oh, this is free to play friend. Well, if we're going to talk like that, yes, I could do a game like that too. I could make the most free to play game I could. And then if you want to donate or something, I could do that easily. Problem is, if I don't have any right to that IP license or actually buy it, you don't count as an official game. You count as something that the developers see or those partners overseas see, they see it as piracy or they see it as something that's like, this should be banned. We're going to take it down. Like that's their mindset. So like, the things that you guys are asking for, it sounds easy, but there's so many rules attached to everything that kind of can't work like that. So, I mean, that's just how it is. As for like Flame Chun Li, how that came in, how characters come in, we did mention that the experience for our versions will be different. And that's just because the way some of these characters are coming out might be switched, depending on, various things that might have been signed from the other side. So if we're working the developers and the developers say, oh, by the way, Crunchyroll Games, because again, keep in mind, Crunchyroll Games is a publisher. We're not the developer. And A Plus is also not the developer. The developer will come to us and be like, hey, we actually can't do this for you guys. It's just because it's reserved for Tencent in their version. So for your guys' version, we're going to have to do something a little different. Hopefully you're okay with that. And we as partners would obviously say, yeah, of course, go ahead. We'll see how it works. And then when it gets implemented, you guys get feedback. Then I take that feedback, toss it there, and then in the future it might get changed. Now you can kind of see like what are all the obstacles and how the train looks to get to the destination which you guys are hoping for. It's kind of like a journey, as you could say. It's not something that you can just teleport. You can't be like Goku and just teleport to the next planet. Like it's not gonna happen. It's gonna be a journey. You're gonna have to go through the good old Vegeta pod and then go all the way to planet Namek through that. That's kind of the distance we do. We can't teleport to Namek. So
Mhm.
Thank you for that. And Luigi, you wanted to ask something or mention something?
Yeah. Hi. Huge fan. I just wanted to know if, yeah, Diana, this is a question for you. Potentially, we were talking earlier on what our investments look like, and the impact they have on your account now and later. So somebody else mentioned how Chun-Li might help somebody who has a weaker account and, might not help the player who has all the tools available to them already. And that kind of reminded me, like, are there going to be any different scalings to characters that have already been created? So, like, the character that I currently implement in my roster will never have a change done to his damage scaling?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say all of the ones that are in the general pool. So those that you can obtain free, I can say there is a possibility if people continue to leave feedback. If you guys want changes to characters, etc., that's actually really good game feedback. And if anything, that's actually something that the teams have kind of been looking into in a way to see if we can spice up the combat system a little bit or spice up the characters that we use. So,
Like, I need to put the brakes on that just to be on, because it's a double-edged sword. You know, like just how I mentioned that I'm looking to protect my investment. So if I have invested in a character that is typically used and is doing extremely well, I would like my character to remain doing well.
Bison
right,
If I have a character
incoming.
that's imbalanced, like everybody and their mother is using a bison, right? And you say, hey, we want to make it so that bison only reses twice. Sure. Right? Like I get it. I get it. Right? But like I don't want my my other character that, may not have been the tits like bison to get slapped in the cheeks. And I want a character that's like useless to become viable.
We want certain sleep cheek slapping. The one behind
I want some
pushing
cheeks to get
forward.
slapped, but I don't want
We
if I
want the
see somebody
squish,
gets
the
their
butt
cheek
slap.
slapped, I'm
Like, go
done.
ahead, guy. You need to move forward. We don't want them slapped in the face to be knocked out.
I got 6 cars, right? I got six. I said, when I got 6 cars, and you're like, hey, don't slap my cheeks, bro.
okay, so let me answer this. Like for example, Monster Hunter, Ken, Dante, Akuma, those kinds of characters, I don't see them being changed because there's already investment from people who already inputted into that. So because of that, there is that portion. As for like Viper and some of them, there is other characters that joined Viper that are treated similarly. If I'm not mistaken, like you have Dulcim, you have oh my god, we can go through the roster: Guile, Poison, regular Zangief, Honda, etc. Like those types of characters, like Sea Viper, they're all free. So there might be at a time where those kinds of units do get changed. So Sea Viper might not be the meta, and there might be a different character that's going to be the meta within the free to play pool. If you're talking about pay to play, those units is probably not going to change. If anything, it might get increased. There's not going to be a decrease on the unit. Any unit.
Well, so you're saying like I could potentially be spending money today, right, on this Akuma character, who I think is the tits, right? Because everybody and their mother's saying that Akuma is the tits, and then like 6 months from now, got a new pair of tits, right? I'm sorry, mom, but like Super Duper Akuma comes out, and boom, my guy's useless in the trash because Super Duper Akuma's out. Is that what you're saying? We're gonna get power crept?
I mean, there might be units that overpower Bison in the future, if that's what you're thinking. So, like those types of things, that will eventually happen, but when, who knows? When the developers think of that, when they feel is the good time to do that, I think for most of it, they may keep the units the same, but I only say they might spice it up for free to play based units is to make the game a little bit more interesting so people aren't using the same characters as everybody else is. So, like, what we've noticed, for example, from what we've been seeing with the community, is like people are using like B Zangief, Bison, etc., the same teams. What we're trying to see is how we can make it where it's not like consistently the same team. if that happens now or in the future, we don't even know that part because we're not the developer, right? As a publisher, this is obviously something we talk about between us. But in terms of the developers seeing that, we're not sure if they've done it on their versions of the games. So the ones that they work with on like Tencent, for example. So when people look at the CN version, we're working with the same devs. Like it's the same team that we're working with. So I'm not sure if that version, like they did any changes. If they didn't do any changes to those units, it's safe to say that we're not going to have that either because we're working with the same team. So that's another thing that you might need to like investigate more because if the CN version, they've never done that for any of the characters, that's probably not going to happen in this version. So that's also something to keep in mind. So you might need to do some research on that and see if anybody who lives in those locations covered the game or plays the game or something like that to answer your full out question because that's a better question for them than me because they'll know what they were experiencing on a version we don't use or we don't have. Like this is a completely different thing and the CN version has actually been around for a bit, so there's more things to work off of from that to see how they handled the specific unit or character and if there was any nerfs or anything that did extremely well. Like that would be something you probably need to look into.
Yeah, and like let's say that our current iteration of the game has 5 character types. Do you think that the entirety of the game is going to have the 5 character types and it'll never add a 6 character type or a 7th character type?
That's always things that can be explored. So, for example, game feedback, I like mentioning this specific channel because you guys can bring up ideas that maybe the developers never thought of. Again, keep in mind, like the development team we work with, they do work with like Street Fighter Duel. They work with like 2 other games, I think. But in general, like the type of feedback you guys are giving could be something that they never really thought of. So we can always push the agenda if there's some really good feedback, like, oh, somebody is requesting that we add a new faction, which means maybe we should introduce more characters. That's perfect. That's really good game feedback. I can send that, and then the teams can really discuss and think like, oh, what's the opportunities around that? Like if we did bring in another faction group, like what could we do? And if it does, obviously it has to work for the company, so it has to be profitable, but also has to make sure that it works with the players. That's great feedback, man. Like if anything, if I were you, I would leave that feedback because it offers more content, more ability for players to use that type of content, new things to kind of explore and do more of with content. Factions are pretty important. So the fact that you just said, would they introduce more factions? That's a pretty good piece of feedback that you probably should put in that channel. See if people upvote it. If you get a lot, I mean, I'll probably still push that anyway. But if you do, leave that feedback in there, it gives me a little bit more ammo that you guys want to see more stuff or you guys want to see more things as possible. So, I mean, all that stuff is possible. It's just how is it seen from the overall community? Because there is comments from people that is like, oh, so if my comment doesn't get agreed upon, I only have like 4 upvotes. Like, am I screwed? Well, no, not really. I mean, I'll eventually send that feedback. If me personally, I think it's a good idea, but I do want it to make like I want to make sure that since social media and how devs see it, how producers see it, how most of the industry sees it within games, they see social media as the vocal minority for everything. So if I'm going to make the most impact out of the vocal minority that is said, I want to use the game feedback section because the game feedback section can literally say how many people actually agree with you. So if you left that comment and you said, yo, we would love more factions, this could open up the doors for so many things, and people agree with you, I can say, yo, devs, yo, etc., producers, etc., look at this. There are 70 people that agree with this. This is not any sort of amount that we usually see. That's like the argument I give to them. Like I tell them that because it's like, whoa, there's 70 people. Usually we only get 10 or 20 people complaining about something. But this is 70. This is 70 people. There's a difference between 20 people and 70. So that's why I do the upvote system. So when you guys put game feedback in it, you guys can support each other and support everybody's feedback to make your voices heard louder. So those that perfect idea. That I hope somebody puts that as game feedback. Like you guys have a lot of ideas and questions of like, Dino, do you think this is gonna happen? Do you think this is gonna happen? A lot of it is like, oh man, I just want you guys to put in game feedback at this point. Like if I'm not in a call and you have the question, like, yo, would they explore this? Would they explore that? Would they do this? Would they do that? Dude, make it a game feedback. See if people agree with you. If they do, I got ammo. That's ammo for me. I'll take that, and the teams that develop the games, they can think about it. That's the process. So if anything, that it's supposed to give you guys a voice to be heard. That's the whole purpose of it.
Trying to remember when I had the answer.
That sounds awesome. Now I guess we can move back to. Uh, I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Maceo or Maceo, because I know you wanted to
Sorry.
add top more
Mace.
topics.
Yeah. Hey, what we? Oh yeah. On the topic of fashion. Not really a question, more just kind of like a conversation. Fashion in its own idea feels like a logistical nightmare to me because the idea that in the early game you have to link this to another character, which means you can't use that character, which means you're trading one character for another. This character has to be like really good. And in the specifics of Flame Chun Li, she doesn't do anything. She really does not. I just don't see like the use for her early game pre Soul,
You
right?
have to remember they do have the ring for legendary units.
But here's the issue with the ring: the ring doesn't come until later on in the game.
That's
By the time you get the ring, bro, you already have an SS plus 5 or multiple SS plus 2, 3s, 4s, whatever. So then it gets to the point of like this character has to then stand on its own. And once you reach that point, I mean, you're getting characters that have like full fighting souls and plus 3s and plus 6s on cars, and now they have to complete with the big bads. So they actually have to either be really good or really bad. And then the fact that a free to play or a person spending a low amount of money, um, with the exception of this new event uh, on Flame Chun Li, uh, I feel like it's a lose lose because either this character's like if they're really bad, no one's gonna buy them, and everyone's just gonna opt out, and you're not gonna see them at all. But if they're really good, then now this character is like completely just gate kept. You either have to spend the money for this character and then sack another character, or you just straight up lose. Like, luckily for us, I've at least for the free to play idea, Fashion Secure isn't the greatest, and we happen to get Fashion Blanca, which I think is by far and away the best fashion character. But I think in the future, I don't know if fashion really goes anywhere, and fashion or Flame Chun Li specifically kind of worries me because if they use that for a benchmark of the discount idea, then I think they're going to get the wrong impression.
Right.
That it was the discount that was the discount was terrible, but in reality the character just sucked.
Well, what if the character on release, instead of being Flame Chun Li, was called Faction Chun Li, and you were able to rotate her faction between fire, thunder, like upon the application of an item. Like you put an item on her, and she becomes that faction, usable in all three faction towers instead of being a legendary unit.
Then
Would
that's
you
a
have
good
bought her?
idea. Would I have bought her?
How
Personally,
could use her on any of the towers if you invest in her?
I'm not the person they're looking at because I don't
Uh,
spend money.
May I ask?
I don't
I
got
would like
money
to
like
ask
that.
this.
I'm a college student, bro.
I should just be the developer for this game. Like those ideas, I just created that. When you said fashion, I was like, wait a minute, fashion, faction.
That's a good idea.
I would like to ask this. What would you prefer to see in terms of like how they handle pay to win characters? Like what would you say is the best way to handle it in terms of pay to win versus free to play and how accessible and if it's busted or not? What would you put in place of what we have now?
Okay, so let me add to that before anyone answers. With that question that he mentioned, with the ideas that you're about to say, how is it both profitable and free to play? You have to think of that. So it might take some time for some of you, but you need to think of those aspects so it's reasonable. So
I'll immediately answer. I'm very realistic when it comes to games in general and the idea of it being for profit. Right. I understand that I'm not the target audience because I just see how far I can get without spending money. If I like the game, I'll spend $5, but 5, 10, 20, 30, but not for the idea of, oh, this character's great. This will really help me. More in the sense of, I like this game. I get developers. I'll just roll with the money and whatever I get's whatever I get. But when I come with that realism, that also comes with the understanding that the only thing you get out of benefiting the free to play community is longevity and understanding, right? Because at the end of the day, you're a person. And if the game was just entirely pay to win, then that kind of suffers, I would say, on a personal level, but not so much on a monetarily level. So the real idea is that you, as a developer and a producer, a person working on this game, you have to kind of make this idea of pay to win being balanced, which is, I think, personally, inherently flawed. I don't think there's a way where pay to win is inherently balanced for the sake of you spend more money, you win, right? Um, all of that to say, my idea of what a character that will make money but still be free to play inclusive would be is that that character doesn't exist. But you could come close with this idea of long-term characters, where if me as a free to play, I want a specific character and I do my due diligence, I save for this character. I know eventually I'm going to get this character. I think with the idea of pity, personally, like if I save this amount of uh, tokens or rolls, or I spend this much amount of time, I know I'm guaranteed to get this character, then I think that's completely fair. But for the pay to win, I want this character now. I drop the money, I get him. I think that's where the real dichotomy needs to be, where the characters are available for free to plays to grind towards, but for a pay to win, listen, bro, you got the money, you just spend the money. This is why I think faction or the fashion heroes are inherently flawed because there's no opportunity for a free to play to grind for this character, to try for this character, to grind for this character. So the character either has to be good for pay to win or bad for pay to win. Someone's going to hurt from that exchange, whether it be the free to play player who just has no opportunity to get this godlike character, or the pay to win. Whereas, I have all this money,
The way is ads. So I hate ads. I hate them myself. That's why I avoid games that do it all the time and force it down your throat. But there's a way that a company could make money by allowing somebody to slowly build up for a character. Say by after they pass a match, they could watch an ad if they wish. If they wish, not just force it down people's throats. But if that's a way that a company could generate money while still unlocking abilities or gems or other things within a game for free to play players.
I think the problem with it, I mean, it's a good idea. But firstly, we work with licensors, so like the licensor may not even be okay with those ads being on top of the game because they're so specific on their IP and the cross-functional aspect of the IP. Like Fortnite was the only game that I can think of that was able to successfully convince Shueisha of all companies to mix Naruto with a gun. Like in reality, that wouldn't happen. So that's kind of like, and that's actually the reality within most companies. Like that, like we're not able to do like an ad on top of that because it's already reflecting on the IP in some way. So like we sadly can't do that. But it also would go against the thing that we're trying to provide, which is the accessibility of the games. Like the moment you come into Street Fighter Duel, you don't have to worry about an ad, right? You can just plow through. You don't have to worry about stamina. You can just plow through. You got 40 characters at launch. There you go. The thing that other people are forgetting, and I'm going to bring that up, and I know this is going to be one of those topics where it's like you, Dino, but I'm going to be completely honest here. we could have made it where only 30 characters came at launch. And then the other 10 come through factions per week or something. That everybody be like, oh, wow, this is free to play friendly. But we already gave you guys that at launch, like on the first day, 40 characters. And because people are so accustomed to it, they think it's like, oh, that was part of the game. But in reality, could we have worked with the developers to say, hey, let's remove 10 characters at the start of the game? Could we have done it? Probably. Did we want to? No. So we at launch gave you 40 characters. That's not something that we needed to do. So it's like there's small stuff like that. Like I get it. Like people are saying, "Oh no, that's a bad example because you should have done that anyway." See, that's where the disconnect is. They didn't have to do that. They did though. And if we did it in a way where nobody would understand that, then it would be like, yeah, we could have launched 25, 30 characters at launch and then slowly give you guys the 10 that you would see eventually every week. How would the perception change? So, kind of thinking on that route too, it might have changed how people perceive the game. But again, it's it's an interesting one for sure.
So, Dino, to that effect, um, are we ever going to receive like global exclusive characters?
Yes, I mean we talked about this. Yeah, there's definitely plans that will happen. We're actually gonna have a survey. You guys will kind of discuss like what's your favorite TV show, anime series, video games you like, celebrities you like, etc. And we're gonna take that data and kind of figure out what exclusive units we're gonna bring over. It's gonna really be like how you guys answer that survey. It'll come in game, and the survey is, I wouldn't say it's lengthy. It will take you about 10 to 15 minutes to complete, but it's going to ask like, how much do you spend? How long have you played the game? Have you played it first day? Did you pre-register? Again, it's going to name all that stuff too. So it's going to really dive into like some specifics you like. And if we see that the audience really likes something more, we're probably going to gravitate towards doing that as a collaboration or something similar to the options you guys were picking. So it's going to be a really good survey to look into. But yes, there will be exclusive units, and there will be units that come in the general pool too. I think that's also been a big question people have been having, and I've mentioned it early in this call too. But there will be more units that will be added to the general pool. We just ask for your patience, but there will be more in the general. There will be more in the special summon. There will be more in divination, all of those over time, it will flood. So then there will be like a very big roster of like 100 characters. That's kind of how I'm seeing it as, because that's how the game is presenting, especially for the long term plans of the game. So you guys might be enjoying 100 plus some odd characters. So that's what's exciting about it.
I mean, that's a lot of awesome, wonderful information. Thank you, Dino. Thank you for everyone else for partaking into this call. It's been extremely lengthy and very informative. Um, I will be winding down the call, but the recording, but the call itself will still be going. So if you guys have any last minute questions or any last minute things you guys want to say, now would be the time to say it. And you guys want to say anything?
Buff Cyber.
But she's already busted.
I think she needs
Don't tell them. Don't tell them.
Like she Viper's already busted. Get out
It's
of
okay.
that.
Oh, I actually did have one more question. I guess you really wouldn't be able to answer. But I mean, I guess the idea on philosophy of the strength of these limited time characters, like Monster Hunter Ken's busted, but like in the future, when Master Chief comes and he's dual wielding uh needlers, like is the idea that these characters that are coming in for this one event going to be like insanely strong? I feel like that's the idea if you want people to spend money on the character, but so more of a given than anything. But do you think like that's the idea? Like all these characters are going to be like power crept, super buff monsters, or just like slightly above the rest? Like, what do you think on that, Dino? If you have anything, I know it's not your uh job, but what do you think?
Yeah, well, how Monster Hunter can happened, and then kind of looking how Akuma is. It is one of those things where you got to really think about it because, just as me as a person while I'm playing this, um, people have said that Akuma is okay. He's not like spectacular, but then others are like, "Yo, Monster Hunter can. That guy is spectacular." I don't know like how Dante is going to be treated. So anything you guys invest into, obviously keep in mind all of those aspects. Like, do you think this guy could be good on your team? It's just one of those things you'll have to like wait and see. But it's kind of like what you guys mentioned with Flame Chun Li. Some of you are saying that she's not viable, and I would assume it's not. But I think it's only viable to a select few of people, maybe those that are kind of like casually playing the game. Because what we'll tell you guys is this: like the big player base that we have, which is over 100,000 players, a lot of them are not at the levels that you guys are talking about. A lot of them are really at like the beginning stages. We're talking like chapter 5 to chapter 10.
Right.
That's where most of the player base is. And those are players that don't are not on social media. So like Flame Chun Li could be the thing that might like break them to spend, and then that kind of brings back the spending thing and stuff. Like if those new players or those existing players, who play in that way, they just they're in the chapters 5 through 10 or whatever, and then they decide to spend on the Flame Chun Li. If that does well, I mean, that discount's probably going to last for every single character moving forward. I think they're testing it. I honestly think the developers are testing things in conjunction to how the units do come out, because again, it's going to vary on you as a person. Like, do you like the character? If you like the character, you'll go for him. It's not always like, hey, is this the character that needs to be the most strongest for me to purchase? I mean, that might be some of you because that might be what you're thinking of, but that's when you go through YouTube and you find a creator who might have done it, that spent a lot and they went through SSS, and then they can tell you, or if you know a whale who does that, they can tell you what, how good Akuma actually is or something like that, or how good MH Ken actually is. Like that's good information to have. So it's really trying to remove yourself from the fear of missing out on some characters. And if you want to wait, just wait for people who's going to spend on the game, and then ask them what they think. If they think like, hey, this is not something I think would be viable on my team, at that point you kind of have your answer for that. So it's up to you whether you want to have them in your box of collections or if you really want to use them and this and that. It's like it's kind of like you use your judgment on stuff. As for like Dante and how I think gonna be, I think following the route of these collab characters. So Monster Hunter Ken is really good. I think Dante is gonna be good. I have a strong feeling he's gonna be pretty good just because he's a collab character. Akuma might have been a different story just because Akuma wasn't a collab character. He was just part of the pool. Well, not in the general pool, but the special summon. But at the same time, Dante as an event won't be like Monster Hunter can. It's so weird. So I'm gonna say that I think the collaboration units are the ones that's gonna be busted in some way. I think that's just me as a player thinking. I truly, from how the things have been setting into place, I think Dante is gonna be busted like Monster Hunter can.
I mean, I guess that's what people want, right? We want those busted units to come out.
But yeah, so you can use it. So that's why it makes sense for somebody to pay for that because it's completely busted. And then it's gonna get you through chapters you never thought. So I mean, yeah, that's the pay to win aspect where the pay to win players will have a huge advantage, obviously. We were trying to figure out ways for free to play to really be involved in stuff, and that's why we do have the general pool. So we will be adding more characters to it, like Street Poison, for example. But the problem is this: so many people have overlooked Street Poison. Like on Reddit, for example, nobody talked about Street Poison. On YouTube, some people talked about Street Poison, but Street Poison is actually really good. And like nobody's shining light on it. So it's like shit. So it's like a lot of the good stuff that's happening, isn't really talked about because it might not even be their favorite character. Like some people may not even like may not even like Poison in general. So that's the thing that we're seeing too. So it's a tough balance because we want people to have access to that, but we also want, I mean, any company does, to see whether a player would be willing to support the game monetarily. And I'm going to give just one really good piece of information that I did give in one of the other calls. I was talking to Sir Zangief about this actually. And it was about my experience with Sega and what I was doing over there. And we worked on various titles, and we had two different titles. One was Fantasy Star Online 2, and the other one was Hatsune Miku Colorful Stage. Hatsune Miku Colorful Stage is by far the one of the most free to play friendly games out there. It was a gotcha game that I worked with. By far amazing for free to play. There's literally 200,000 plus players consistently on that game. It's like a rhythm game. And the biggest problem with that game is it has 200,000 players and it's making nothing because it's too free to play, even though there is paid to play options. The problem that it's facing is they don't know how to introduce it to the player base without receiving negative comments. It's interesting. So that game is able to get players. It's tough for them to monetize. So it's completely free to play, but they're on the verge of being on the iffy side of maybe closing down global. I don't know when that's going to be. Just take this with a grain of salt. But when I was over there, every month, when Japan, like Sega Japan, would talk about the game, they would always talk about the revenue of it and comparing it to like Fantasy Star. For whatever reason, Fantasy Star Online 2 made more money than Hatsune Miku Colorful Stage. Fantasy Star Online 2 gets 50,000 players, which is 1/4 of 200,000. And it makes more money than the 200 players. So that's why it's so tough for companies to support more free to play actions because, yeah, you can get a lot of players. But at the end of the day, to keep the servers going, to pay a license, to do all that, like they are looking for a profit in some way. So they do want to give you free to play options, but at the same time, they understand that there needs to be a point where that free to play player eventually spends. Whether you've spent $10 in your lifetime of playing this game, or $100 or 10,000 or whatever, the goal is definitely for at least a free to play player to eventually, or any player, to pitch in something because that's what's going to keep the game going. So that's just like a realistic thing I want to let you guys know. Like one of the games I was working on, 200,000 players. The other game I was working on, 50,000. The one that was 50,000 players was doing way better than the one that was 200,000.
Yep.
And that's scary. So that's why it doesn't help my case as a community manager because I can be like, well, look at this, but it's like, shit. Like when I was doing community management, like at Sega, I couldn't say that because they would say I'm dumb. They would say I'm stupid because the numbers don't lie. Like there was 200,000 players and it was making less money than a 50,000 player game. So I was like, I can't not say the game is, it's tough, So that's the data that these companies see, and they're going to evaluate that, and whatever is most profitable at the end of the day, that's what keeps the games up. It's not the player base in that way. It's definitely how much spend is being added on top of all that.
Spend more money.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing. It's like I don't like as a free to play player, you don't have to. Like I'm not telling you to do that. Like that's up to you. You don't have to spend a dime or a penny. I'm just telling you, like realistically, if you're gonna be in gotcha games and you feel like a game might not be doing okay monetarily or this and that, I mean, it would be safe to assume that eventually that game might die quicker just because of that. But that's just something you guys should be looking for all games. And it's not based off of the player base because again, like Colorful Stage, fantastic, huge player base, thriving, 100,000 members in Discord, crazy support on social media. It's like one of the most beloved rhythm games out there, but it can't make any money. So like, what the hell? It's like where there's all this support and like no money, and that's unfortunate because that at that point it's like how do we keep 200,000 players because we have to pay more on server costs than we have to do for Fantasy Star Online 2 because there's less players, so that means there's less server costs. The more players there are, the more server costs there is. And if there's not many people that is paying to help support that while the company also makes profit, that's tough to keep around. Like it's not easy.
Well, I know that it won't have anything to do with the server costs, but you know how when you log in to Street Fighter Duel right now, like I'm on server 84 and so is on server 90. Are we eventually gonna get like a collapsing of the servers? Maybe like groupings?
I would if I would say like if most games do it, I would say probably. Like
Yeah.
if it comes to that point where I don't know, players
Well,
decrease or I don't know, like how they if
yeah,
you
so what end up happening is like 3 or 4 players on each server would be the best of their best on their server, and it wouldn't necessarily feel like competition anymore. You know, like kind of like how the whales feel on their server right now. Each one of them feels like they're the big boy, and everybody else is just like their little simplings. But like if you do the server combination thing, like then you get a lot of big fish together instead of just one little baby.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I think if you want to bring that up in game feedback, I can push it because it can be a. So what I like about game feedback, I mentioned a lot is a lot of the topics that I talk about, it gets mentioned to the development teams, but it becomes like a bigger discussion for like the future or what we could do as early as possible. It can spiral into other conversations, which is kind of why I push the narrative for it because a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just take my comment? You know, I don't know, like Sir Turtle 69. Why don't you just take my one comment and give it to the devs? Well, I don't think the devs will like fully, say the Sir Turtle 69 understands like, what is going on. So we need kind of like feedback. We need more people to agree with whatever this person
I'll
is saying
be
because it makes
I'll
sense.
be the first person. I'll take the bullet for this. We gotta have an intelligent conversation here, people. We can't just throw our hands up in the air and be like, "It's bad, fix it." Like I might not be the most rational thinker at times, but if if we are gonna use game feedback, just try to formulate a point instead of let's formulate a point and come up with a solution. Like that's how the game feedback. That's how I treat it. That's how I read comments and stuff on there. That sometimes I just upvote people who are complaining. I'm sorry, but because I have the same complaints. But if I post in game feedback and I will literally posted there once with a really big one, but and I haven't been posting lately. Um, but let's point out a problem. Let's come up with some solutions as to why it would work or what you would need to what would you need for that idea to succeed? What part you don't know? Like, oh, I want I want B rank characters to get to S triple S. Was like, well, what's your reasoning beyond the character? Like, let's try to come up with something for the B rank characters to succeed, other than just say, oh, Ryu Ken, best character in game shouldn't be B rank. I was like, well, I mean, true, but try to come up with a solution to the problem
Yeah,
and instead of
I want to add something to that really quick. That was actually a conversation we had. We brought that up because we were like, wait, Ryu and Ken, yeah, that makes sense. Like they're the stars of the game, like in the IP.
debatable,
Yeah, it's like
debatable,
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not
debatable,
debatable. I'll fight you, then.
debatable.
I'll fight
You already know. You already
Could
know.
be anyone really.
you.
It could be anyone. Really. You can like in Street Fighter 2, you could pick 8 different characters, bro. And if you look at the box, Brock is the main character because he's
Yes,
fucking
but
Yeah, that's
all
what
right.
Brook rules on.
how many of those characters can you ask a random person to know their names?
Well, that's a fair point.
that is a
They make some
very
money.
good. That is a very good point. That
That's a
is a
fair
very good
point.
point.
You look at Ken
That
and
is a very
everybody's
good.
like, that's sexy mofo's Ken. You look at Zangief and everybody's like, that's just a muscle bound wrestler.
That's a big dude. Ain't he the grappler?
Yeah, dude. Nah, but yeah, I got a chance to break away for a minute, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate you jumping into these calls lately. Well, this is I appreciate the podcast. I appreciate the way to express myself. Um, I'll be in listening, but I gotta get back to work. But yeah, I feel like we're heading in the right direction. And Flame Chun-Li's not bad. And Zangief is the best character. And I don't think I gotta say much more than that.
All the fighting words.
Nothing.
All the
Just
fighting words, man. All the fighting words. They did my boy Ken dirty. I'm still doing that feedback soon.
Well, you better come. I try to read. So when Air, what was his name? His name was Air something. I know you know his name.
Air Jordan.
Yeah. Anyways, there was a fella in there complaining about the Kent, and I was just trying to bring it up. Me and Hank McCoy. Where is Hank, by the way? Does anybody know him personally?
He went
Me and
to
Hank.
Genshin Impact.
Yeah, he went back again. Alright.
Yeah,
But me and
I
Hank had a
saw
good
the. I
conversation.
remember seeing the post where he's like, "All right, guys, I'm out. I'll see you guys later at some point." And I was like, "Oh, hopefully we see you back." And then he dipped.
Oh no, but yeah, the game feedback is great. But let's if you're gonna bring up a point in the game feedback, try to rationalize it. And the game feedback discussion is a good place to rationalize those ideas. And these open conversations that we have on Fridays are a good way to do it live. Kind of peer review. I was hearing some really good stuff while I was working about how to get characters and stuff and pushing exclusivity on premium characters while also supplementing your free to play players with items and characters that might benefit them is a tough balance for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like one other thing I want to just mention is free to play players. Like it almost seems like at the end of like from what I've been gathering and what people have been saying, it almost feels like a lot of people think like I am the villain for that, when in reality I'm just trying to like explain to people like why it is the way it is. It's that like I dislike free to play. It's just sadly how business is revolved around money, right? Like I wish the world wasn't revolved around money, but at the same time, money is almost everything at this point. And we all need money for something.
Right.
So
Well, use the villain.
yeah, we're all surrounded by it. So it's like, God damn it. But me personally, like, I'm big into free to play. Like when I was playing, I mentioned RuneScape. I was free to play for the longest time. In that game, honestly, only costed at that time when I started, it was like $5-6 a month for membership. Like eventually, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna. But I like free to play for a lot of games. There's a lot of cool things from it, especially if a game does it really well. But I also, I get why there's frustration, but then there's the trying to put into the realism of it and seeing that okay, we did give 40 characters. I really don't want to like backpedal into that, but it's like we did at the start give 40 characters and we could have done 30. We could have even done 5.
To quote a very wise man, um, just because you are a bad guy, it doesn't make you a bad guy.
Alex G, I wonder who that is.
Seriously, you're going Wreck-It Ralph? Really?
Well, he's a player. He's a game.
Oh my god.
Honestly, feel like those subtracting characters, if Bison was one of them, this game would look a lot better. I feel like it'd be more balanced.
Oh yeah, seems like most people use Bison. Well, it's actually not even
Bison pushes a really big envelope. I'll put that out. I'll be the first one to put that out there. Bison allows players to do things that you're really not supposed to do.
Bison is a meta definer, is what I would call him as.
Yeah, we only have two realistically. What I claim as meta defenders is Beef and Bison. I don't know anyone
Yeah.
else.
I would say Bison is the only meta definer in the PvP aspect, but in the general aspect,
Oh
it's
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
both.
yeah. Hands down, every team is running
He's not
Bison in PvP.
he's not unbeatable at the highest level. Like if draft has taught me anything.
No, draft taught me the opposite, bro. I quite literally, I put no thought in the draft. If I have Bison on my team, I win.
I'll actually counterpoint to that. I put so here's my draft team that I put together. It was um it was D Honda, Zangief, Bison, and who was my like I think I put Poison outside for my DPS. But I'll admit I had Bison on my team, but I had no problem dispatching enemy Bisons with the Zangief. And that's not me speaking from bias. I just like Zangief with 6 cars is he wrecks Bison. And then all you have on combo through when you're doing your AoE and your opponent's not set up for a shield or anything, it's kind of trivial to deal with Zangief. I mean to deal with Bison when you have a kitted Zangief. But the caveat is you need the kitted Zangief.
Yeah, and I'll say that you actually kind of proved my point for me. It's the fact that you have to build your team around the fact that you have to beat Bison is what makes him a meta definer. It's not the fact that he could be beaten, because he can, but it's the idea that if you don't beat him, you lose.
Yeah,
That's what a
that's a
meta
very
definer
big
is.
point. That is definitely the
Fair.
very big point.
And you can literally put Bison on any team.
Yeah,
Yeah, all that thought that you put in there, quite literally, I was like Bison and some other guys, and unless you know how to beat Bison, I beat your team, bro.
this comes to the question of like, do we want more units like B Zangief?
I think B Zangief is great, but that's because I'm a
You know how you're talking about buffing up some other characters? These other ones that are low tier that no one ever picks, like give them a little bit of better stats or give them a silence. That would be pretty awesome to see other or increase their silencing, right? Some of these other ones, I think, yeah, he can have a silence, but it's so low that and he's kind of squishy that he's not usable. So if you were to increase his silencing potential and maybe a dodge, like he would be pretty good.
I think the game is too. I think the game is too close to its infancy to shift right. Yeah, but
I think we're gonna touch this.
Yes, but
Would we
exactly why Bison should be here.
True.
would we
Like-
want a meta defining unit
think
to
the
be
simple-
pay to win?
I think the simplest change you could do is just have Bison only perform his resurrection once or twice
Nope,
if you
nope,
have him.
nope.
But then
no,
that embrace the character
Nope.
because
Look,
you're
look,
like,
look,
yeah,
look,
$1,000 on him.
You cannot. I realistically at this point,
Yeah, it's too late.
touching Bison is way too dangerous. Touching Bison in the terms of nerfing or anything like that, you're literally gonna slap 90% of your player base because I think
Yeah,
everyone
We
uses
talked
it.
about it last week. We talked about it last week. It's too late to shift. It's
Yeah,
too
like
late to shift Bison.
you
So
have
what needs to happen? What needs to happen is they need to add characters that can nullify passes. That's it.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's what it's
that would definitely help. Now, I guess I have one question in terms of like pay to win and meta defining. Would it be bad to have a meta defining unit as like Fashion Blanca or Flame Chung Li? Would y'all pay $30 for a meta defining unit, and is that a good idea?
I think it's a good idea strictly on the monetary side. I think if you have a meta defining unit that costs money, you make a lot of money.
But for the player,
But even on the personal level, like if it's on the discount, I would imagine a lot of people will buy it. Me being hard hit and broke, I don't have the luxury of even like $30. I spent only like $5 on one of my accounts, and then I kind of didn't even play on that one. I'm just free to play on this one. But like, I think the idea of like someone like Fashion Blanca being $30. I'll use him as an example because I think he's one of the strongest
hands down,
PvE boss fighting.
hands
characters in
down.
the game.
I think he's
Luckily,
one of the
everyone
better
can have him.
units in the game, realistically.
But someone like that that's good in their specific zone and is unbeatable in that specific zone for $30, I think it's fine. Not a lot of people are going to be like super happy with it, but I think a vast majority of people are going to be just fine thinking, okay, well, this guy's good. He's easy to understand. Let me just go ahead and pick him up for $30, and I'll have my boss fights managed, and I can focus on other things. I think it's a fine idea, even as someone who is strictly free to play. I think it's a fine idea. Now, if Bison was in that slot where he defines every meta, I'd be a little bit more like, okay,
Like a
that's kind of
$30
tough.
Bison, you would be against?
I would be against someone as good as Bison being in the $30. Like you have to spend $30 to buy him,
Well,
just
that's what I'm
because
saying. Like a meta defining unit as a pay to win. Like there's no other way. Like you have to compare it to Bison in that extent.
well, Bison is what I would consider a logical extreme. Because I think Fashion Blanca is close, if not already meta defining in the sense of boss fight specifically. Like he defines if you have a good what is it flame Fashion Blanca, sorry, um you really don't need much else, right? The leaderboard's kind of nothing but Fashion Blancas as the primary carry in bosses specifically. I think in that microcosm of bosses, he's a meta definer, and I think that's completely fine. But when you have someone like Bison, who is quite literally the meta definer in any and every aspect of the word, that becomes a problem if he's land or completely locked for $30. Because in the game, kind of turns from this, it's pay to win in parentheses, where yeah, if you have this unit you kind of win in this aspect, but you have alternatives. Two, this game is Bison, and if you have Bison, you win. And if you didn't spend money on Bison, you're not playing the game because you're behind in arena, you're behind in bosses, you're behind in PVE, you're behind in PvP. You can't do anything unless you spend that $30. I think that's where the issue arises.
What about a character you get like as strong as Faction Block? I like your comparison because that's a good spot. But it would be a faction character, SSS, right? Unlocked for $30. And you can still get more so that you can pump it up still. Like it'll still be in the towers and stuff, but you're paying $30, but you're going to get a boost in it. Would you guys be interested in that? I would. I would pay $30 for a character like that.
I think
For
that's
what?
probably the best monetization way to do it.
Honestly,
Wait, for a character that does what? One more time?
It's SSS, so it comes in as an SSS. A person could buy it. It's $30, right?
Well,
Because you're trying to
30 might
market
be
the
too
buy.
cheap. To,
Maybe
to
too
be
cheap.
honest with
You
you,
go
30
one
might
buy SSS,
30
right?
might be on the other end where honestly you're giving that away for too little, bro.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
But
because
then you get a
you
lot
have to
more
think
people
about it like this
jumping
in
in on
terms
it.
of what an SSS unit entails. SSS unit is 5 levels in terms of the overall account. A SSS unit is a huge buff in power levels for the overall account, and is a great attachment for legendary units. So like, yeah, I agree on what Maseo says, and like you don't want it to be too cheap, but you don't want it to be too expensive.
Right. You got to hit that like price point where everyone's like, "Oh, this is not only worth the money, but I feel good that if I didn't spend this money, I would still be able to succeed in the game." And then you feel a lot more comfortable about spending the money because it feels like you're making the transaction, not being forced to make the transaction. That's where I think the difference arises. If I'm forced to spend that $30, I don't want to spend the $30. But if I'm like, oh, I could spend the $30, I don't have to, but I could. It speeds the game up. It does this. It does that. You feel a lot better about it. It's like you choosing to do the dishes instead of your mom
Versus
coming
being
in and
told
going,
to
bro,
do
do
the
those
dishes.
goddamn dishes.
I
You're gonna if you have to. You're like, it's not. You can't say no, but your only option is moving out the house.
dang that moment.
But if your mom was like, listen, I did so much for you. Could you, spend some time doing the dishes? You'd be like, man, I love my mom. This is amazing. This is great. She's done so much. She just bought the groceries. Why don't I go ahead and help him out and spend the $30? I think that's where the difference is.
Worst 9 months of her life.
Not supposed to 9 months out of her life. I'm hesitating again.
Well, I just said, remember, faction Chun-Li would have been better than flame Chun-Li.
True.
The unit you
I-
can put in any of the faction towers.
If I could be honest, I don't like Flame Chun-Li because it sets the precedent that future characters from different regions are not guaranteed to be in whatever faction that they came in. I understand the idea that
Yeah, it's already been stated.
Vega and Akuma are not in the type
Right.
they were supposed to be.
right, but now
Shouldn't
we're
get
we're,
scanned as well.
we're flopping to fashion, right? Like this
Well,
character could now just be instead of like kind of obtainable to straight up price locked.
Well, yeah, the fashion characters
Yeah.
have always been a money only character in the other regions, right?
Mhm.
And then there are more factions in the other regions. Like the idea of adding one to ours is not going to be something that's unheard of because they have 6 typings in the other game. We have 4. They have a light unit, a dark unit, an earth unit, a forest type. Like, what in the heck is a forest type? And
True.
we just have 3 types.
True.
Remember again, it's a different publisher.
I mean, I get it, but the resource is there. Like, just because it's a different publisher means that we can't work off of it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
we have
hard.
the assets.
Cool.
We have the assets. That's how we have to think about it. It's there and then it's available.
Right.
So, do they have multiple faction powers, like 6 or 5, whatever? Do they have that many?
I don't play that trash.
I would imagine. I would imagine.
Yeah, I guess so.
If they have those factions, they kind of just followed logic that they would.
Mm.
More rewards, and I think more opportunities to kind of introduce, like you said, introduce new characters. Because I feel like in this one, it's like you kind of have 3 options. Do you want it to be free to play? You put it in one of the 3 factions. If you want it to be more pay to win sided, but kind of still accessible, you put it in Inferno or
So,
Legendary. Right? If you want it to be straight up pay to win, you just put it in
if you
fashion.
talk about like game progression, like think about a game that you've been playing for 10 years, right? And the difference that the game had on day 1 versus its life at 10 years, and
Completely
the amount of characters available, right? They'll lead to a barrier to entry. So if we add 30, 40 characters to a 40 character roster, and then you go to pull with your arcade coins, you now have a chance of pulling 1 out of 80 characters instead of pulling 1 out of 40 characters. So that means SSSing a unit is going to take way longer with the bigger pool of characters.
I'll counter that because the wish list is really good as it is. Once you get like past like 100 draws and then you complete your wish list, you're guaranteed to get anyone on your wish
Right,
list.
but I'm saying that like a barrier to entry is a problem for a developer.
Oh, yeah, then I see your point. Yeah.
So like if I were to say like, hey, I really want to learn how to play so and so game, but the game has existed for 10 years. Right? My friend told me that so and so game is awesome, and I'm gonna try and play with him today. And like there is no way that I could realistically set foot into a game because of this barrier to entry preventing me from doing content that was doable before. That's what you need to be able to prevent. So that's why people say don't nerf characters, because what was previously doable, you definitely can't prevent someone from doing in the future.
Typically, what companies do, from what I've seen, is do massive power clipping. That's pretty much it.
Like a stat squish.
Yes, they'll keep on releasing characters that are better than the last every like 3 months. You guys call it meta defining characters. I don't really like that term, but that's what it is. They'll release characters that are like much better than Bison, so you have to, purchase that character or just get it, progress your game that way, and then 3 months another character comes out. That's pretty much how it typically goes.
Well, an easier solution is creating something called like a pull 1 and pull 2 token. So like you would be able to split the original cast into 1 coin, and then like you could use that same coin for the second set, and then just choose to pull, so you could focus.
But the problem with what you said, like, is that you have games like the Final Fantasy Gacha game. That game has around 200, 300 units, and only like about 80 are useful. If 80, I think I'm exaggerating here. So power clipping isn't the answer at all. Nerfing units isn't the answer. I think what a lot of people will want to see is units like C Dudley being buffed, maybe possible to a Bison counter instead of straight up nerfing Bison. Because me as a free to play, I've been playing since day one, pre-registered player. Okay, I've invested a lot on Bison, a lot of gems, like most of my gems on him. If you nerf him, that pretty much means most of what I spent on him has gone to waste because he's now not the unit he used to be. And there's also the problem with what Luigi said about older content becoming harder because you start to nerf these units just to make new ones. So I think the threshold should be you look at Bison and you can't do anything much better than him because he's already better than fighting. So now you should play around that. That's what I truly think is the best with the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They did
that
anything
makes
with a
sense.
character. And then you
It
hit
makes
him
sense,
past
but
chapter 20, you're done.
yeah, that makes sense. But in a monetary standpoint, they're not going to do that. That's why games like Bleach Brave Souls, has major power clipping. It's what they do.
Power
So
Clip makes a lot of money.
Oh
Also,
yeah,
yeah,
you know,
I'm just telling you, it's what's gonna happen. Dante's gonna be broken. If not, the next collab will be.
but the thing is, I think I agree with you because Monster Hunter Dan, a lot of people don't speak about him. He's completely game breaking. He actually breaks the game. Like
he
if
is
you
a
see, if you look at whale accounts, there's not a single whale that doesn't use this thing. It's
yep.
always MHK, this Zangief, Bison, and a +1. Always. Because that's the best team in the game right now for story.
They use
Yep.
combo outside of combo. That's it. That's
All I'm
best.
saying is, if this company cares about like whales spending money, then they'll give them an incentive to spend more. If you're releasing characters weaker than Bison or Magla Ken, Dante, they're not going to spend. Look at Flame Chun Li.
Like,
If
but
she wasn't, if she wasn't a legendary discounted character, no one would have +5'd her.
But yeah, but that's because that's a flame chun. That's not, for example, like a usable version of Dan, for example. If you release like a special version of Dan, Dan currently is a B unit. Let's imagine they release a fashion Dan, let's say. Everyone is gonna buy him. Dan is such a lovable character. Whether he's good or not. People are buying.
That was the worst example possible. Damn.
Yeah.
Dog.
Yeah. That's why
Such a lovable character.
Just weird.
Give me Fashion Ken all day.
but I think you understood the point.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm gonna be honest.
I
Give me
just, I
Fashion
just
Ken
see where
all
the
day,
game's
baby.
going.
Nah, but I think there's a quite easy way to kind of fit the best of both worlds, and that is power clipping doesn't have to be a linear stepping stone.
Exactly.
This character counters this character, this character counters this character, and this character counters this character. What you can have it is this character counters Bison, but this guy counters the guy that counters Bison.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
So now you have
Pretty much how it
it
goes.
going in that kind of triangle that turns into a square that turns into this and turns into that into bigger and bigger shapes where this character counters these three characters or this type of character, but he's pretty weak against this and that. And then you still have the idea of this pay to win or pay to play, let's call it like this, pay to win player who's like, oh snap, I need this guy because I'm seeing a lot of Bisons against, or in my server on my ladder. I need to grab him. And then the guy he's fighting against goes, oh snap, he got super duper Dan. Apparently he's the best character in the game now. And I need like super duper Chun Li to counter that Dan. But then it goes back and forth in that sense. And then pay to wins just keep battling against each other.
wait, but you're saying that rock paper scissors thing, right? And
Correct.
like I've noticed that this game doesn't really give a shit about the power triangle right now. You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? Like wind is supposed to have an advantage and fire is supposed to have an advantage. It feels
Right
like
now,
it doesn't matter at all.
yeah,
Well,
right now,
the thing about that,
in a way that doesn't matter at all. It's team comps above.
Yeah, I think in most games that
yeah,
that's
you're not
No,
gonna
but I'm
feel
saying
that.
like I feel like maybe we could get a bigger impact on that faction typing, and then maybe it would do a lot for the meta. Like some of the characters that would feel less useful might feel more useful. Like some of the flame typing guys, if they beat a certain level that you couldn't beat unless you had a flame team.
Yeah, but that's mostly because the units aren't all like on an equal pairing. If you look at a game, for example, like Summon Wars, I'm sure you guys all know that game.
I actually played for quite a
Like
bit.
a super old gacha game. That game has an insane pool of units, but I can guarantee you right now, at least more than half of those units are all useful and really good. Well, in the most cases, okay? And it's all like free to play units too. Easily obtainable, easily upgradable. The only issue with that game is that the pool is huge, okay? So getting a specific unit often is hard. Like it is truly possible to make like
Impossible. We'll call it like it is. There's
well,
way too many characters and way too many types of
yeah,
characters
yeah,
that you could
it's
get your character and it's just like wind. And you're like, well, damn, I needed the fire one. That's
yeah, yeah,
easy.
yeah. That's the thing, because some of the wars is like what that game does is introduces a character and five different versions of the same character in all the factions. So like you can get the character, but it's a different attribute that you need. So that's how that game does it to make money basically. Instead of releasing one character, they release the same character five times, and they all do different stuff, but it's all around one theme. Yeah,
Mhm. I
but
think it's an interesting concept, but it's surely archaic in its gotcha
yeah,
system.
it is very arcade.
No pity, like I don't know, what's the chance? Isn't it like
Yeah,
what
it's
100% or
really old
something?
style gacha style. It's like a huge roster of characters. They're all mostly good and useful, but it's really hard to pull specifically what you want.
You suck it.
Yeah,
Well, like,
Grateful
what
for
is
you
the
all's
type
time.
advantage in this game right now? 10%?
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
it's
you, man.
very good.
I'm glad this exists. For reals, I don't know a lot of games that will do this to this extent, so it makes me really happy, and gives me I think a lot of people pleasure knowing that there is longevity in the game. That's the main thing I want to say, and thank you very much. I'll see you all next week, and I'll be on the Discord with you.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect time to end the podcast. So for those that are listening in, thank you.
Well said.
Join the Discord if you want to partake in this podcast and you're hearing this on YouTube. Join the Discord. It's a wonderful, growing community. There's a whole bunch of passionate people that care for this game, that cares for games in
Yo,
general, and they care for each other. That spam a lot of ducks. Thank you. Like, comment, subscribe. Stay happy, stay hydrated, stay alive, and have a good night from all of us.
Someone take that guy's soundboard away, bro.
Sweet, another